Turning on microphones always helps. What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Starting this off up in the top window today because, honestly, we just got to get right into things. 13 games to talk about on a Friday. Happy Friday to everybody out there. Welcome to the show. We are going to run through this thing top to bottom. Only got a few of the 26 lineups in so far. I'm sure we'll get most of them during the show. Going to try to get through it as efficiently as possible, but I expect I'm going to be sounding a little bit rough by the end of the show and be a little bit worn out on going through this stuff. But hopefully you guys will stick with all the way through. Hit that like button to get us started. Subscribe if you've never subscribed. Check out our pals over at acemind.io for all your sim and optimizer needs. Promo code rotoscouts over there, all in caps, gets you 20% off your first month. And that is the business that we need to take care of. So let's dive into this thing. For as large of a slate as it is, and it is a large slate, this is an ugly pitching board. Very, very good against the tough opponent. And then we immediately hit a sea of mediocrity right about here. Logan Webb's very good, but he's against a tough opponent. Drew Thorpe, I think, is going to be good. Good opponent. Pretty rough so far. A lot of rain in that area. And then a lot of just, woof. It's going to be an ugly one. The ugly ones are the fun ones, though. Starting with the board here. Anthony Taylor, happy Friday to you as well. Dimitri, happy Friday. Andy Melman, happy Friday. Monty Pritchett, it's the freaking weekend. What better time than now to go out and win something? I love it. Cujo Blue up at the top. First one in the door, TGIF. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Let's dive in. Otherwise, we're probably already behind schedule. It's like in Tropic Thunder when they're like, he's already a month behind schedule after just 3 days of shooting. It's about how I feel about this slate right now. Texas Rangers, Baltimore Orioles up at the top. Albert Suarez going for the Orioles, facing Max Scherzer in his second start back. The Orioles pulling a 4.47 implied total against Max, and it's a partial Max. It's not going to be full-bore Max. He only faced 16 hitters, went 5 innings the last time out. Struck out 4, only allowed 1 hit. He was good. He was effective, but it's still not going to be full-bore, full innings, I don't think. So we're seeing a little bit of a hefty total on the Orioles side. Not a monster, but mid-4s. And then going back the other way, just 4.11 for the up-and-down Texas Rangers against Albert Suarez, which is maybe a little bit low. Suarez is not the best pitcher in the world, also not the worst pitcher in the world. I can absolutely see Texas getting to him. It's not a spot that feels quite like Cincinnati did yesterday, where I was saying, hey, that feels really low. I'm not sure what's up with that line. And it goes off, it doesn't go off either way. And it did. But my point is, I don't feel exactly the same way about this. It just seems a little bit light, but it's not like, wow, that feels like a full run light, and I'm seeing a lot of upside kind of a spot. But we'll take a look at the Texas bats against Suarez there. Yanks and the Blue Jays. Yanks going up against Yusei Kikuchi, who is vulnerable to power in a lot of instances, but otherwise has pitched, by and large, pretty well this season. 4.02 implied total for New York. A little bit of a diminished New York lineup as well going into Toronto. Fairly even game on the Vegas board, just a 4.06 implied total on the other side for the Blue Jays going up against former Blue Jay Marcus Stroman. Stroman, effective enough. Kind of a pitcher. Really, both of these guys are on the board on, again, a deep but ugly pitching slate. A lot of names, but kind of shallow, if that's the better way to put that. So I think either one of these guys is playable. In general, I would prefer to use Stroman and target the Blue Jays, but their fairly low strikeout combined with his fairly low strikeout nature doesn't add up to a dynamite DFS spot. You just got to have some faith in Kikuchi if you go that route, finding his strikeouts and avoiding the long ball against the Yankees, which can be problematic from time to time. But we'll give that one a look. Maybe the offense is not quite as strong as they might normally be. Padres at the Red Sox. The Bo Sox, one of the top teams overall on the board, facing Randy Vasquez. Nick Pivetta going for the Red Sox. He's got the Padres at 4.33 implied runs. We could see an upside day from Pivetta on the right day, though. That's a diminished version of the Padres. That said, they are drawing a little bit of a run total in Fenway tonight. It's going to be a hitter-friendly environment, tied for the highest run total on the board at 9.5. And the Red Sox have the highest implied total at 5.28 runs on their side. So Boston's looking pretty solid. The Rockies against the White Sox. There is weather in this one. Seems like it's pretty definitely going to get rained on, and then it just depends on how they actually handle it. And that's true in Chicago. It looks like there are storms in the Atlanta area for the Pittsburgh and the Braves game that we're going to get to in a second. Cleveland and Kansas City's got some weather, and Cincinnati, St. Louis has some weather. So Atlanta plus the Midwest. have weather concerns. But assuming this one goes, Rockies, road, righty, facing Drew Thorpe. Young kid making his, I want to say, fourth start. I think it's been 2 bad and 1 good so far from Thorpe. But a lot of quality has been among the leaders in professional baseball at any level in strikeout to walk rate over the last few years in his minor league career. So there's a lot of talent there. He's got a mediocre fastball, an amazing changeup. We'll see how it goes, but it's a great opponent for the kid. 4.13 implied total for the Rockies, arguably a little bit high, but that is a improved Rockies lineup. 4.46 for Chicago on their side. Seems like a fairly high total for the terrible White Sox, but they're facing Dakota Hudson. Not that we're drawn to Dakota Hudson, even in one of the best matchups, if not the best matchup in baseball for his side. But I could see him kind of keeping them a little bit in check, given that what he does is typically keep the ball in the yard. He's had a little bit more blips this season. 1, 2, 3 games in his last, call it 10. He's given up 2 home runs. But in all the other games, he gave up no home runs. So I just think, the combination of factors there, if he's just inducing ground balls, maybe you see a few runs from the White Sox, but not quite a giant day. Like maybe it comes in 4 or 5. But not a monster like 11-run type DFS day. Astros at the Mets. Ronald Blanco going for the Astros has the Mets at 4.05. Jose Quintana going the other way has the Astros at just 4.03. Seems like another spot to maybe consider some mediocre pitching. Quintana's been pitching fairly effectively. He's gone 6+ in each of his last 2. Struck out 6, then struck out 8 against the Padres and the Cubs. Relatively comparable opponents. And then Ronald Blanco came back from that sticky stuff thing and continued to mostly cruise. He's been pretty good. So I guess that wasn't really where he was getting his benefit. Still don't exactly know what's good about him, but he's making it work. So pitching on either side in that one. There are bats on both sides for sure. The Mets were showing a little bit of power against Blanco. So I think we can consider some offenses there, but not a darling of the Vegas board by any means. Pirates at the Braves. Martin Perez going for the Pirates, pushing the Braves all the way up to 5.26 implied runs. They look pretty solid despite their ongoing mediocrity. Their ongoing mediocrity. And then the Pirates going the other way, just 3.85 implied runs against Charlie Morton. Aging Charlie, one of the better pitching options probably on the slate, given the quality, given the opponent, given the run total there. But he has had some rough spots throughout the season. 5-run game the last time out against the Yanks, gave up 4 earned, 5 total runs to the Nationals. Another 8-run game against that same Nationals team. Had a 6-run game against the Marlins. Charlie's had a little bit of difficulty putting away some of these lousy teams. So not that that's predictive in any way. But we are dealing with a latter stages Charlie Morton here. Colin Ray, Jameson Taillon. Interesting matchup between the Cubbies and the Brewers. 8.5 run total in the game. I could see getting to bats on either side. Ray is a pitcher that I don't mind targeting and can certainly get to with some of those Cubs bats that show a lot of quality that I like. And then Taillon going for the Cubbies. He's shown a little bit of life over some recent starts. He struck out 10 Mets in his most recent one, went 7 innings. He's gone 6+ in 3 straight. Believable upside for him, but the Brewers are a tough opponent. 4.58 implied runs on the Milwaukee side. So could definitely consider bats. Might throw some pitching into the mix. We'll take a look at it. The Guardians and the Royals, 9.5 runs. This was 10 runs earlier in the day, is the highest implied total of the day. It's another spot where I ended up going to this this game as a game stack last night, and it didn't really work out at very similar totals. That was a spot that I really liked, and I kind of like it just as much today. Both of these teams rank out pretty well, 4.80 implied runs on either side. Definitely some appeal. Alec Marsh going against Tristan McKenzie in that one. The Reds not getting the same warm and fuzzies from the Reds necessarily today that I was. They're showing a lot less power on the board for one thing, going against Andre Palante, who's allowed 3 home runs in 5 starts and a bunch of outings so far this season. He's somewhat limiting for home run power. He's somewhat good at keeping the ball down, so it just checks the Reds a little bit. And then going the other way, Frankie Montas pushing a little bit of a total toward the Cardinals, but they're decidedly mediocre. 4.49 implied total for St. Louis, 4.09 implied runs for Cincinnati, and again, weather in the area in that one. Detroit at the Angels, 4.64 implied total for the Tigers. Zach Plesac against Kenta Maeda. So Plesac going for the Angels, just his 3rd outing of the year. And then Kenta Maeda been mostly a mess going for the Tigers. I could see getting to cheap bats on either side of that game. I really could. How about the kid from the Angels last night, by the way? At 5,500 that we talked about. I didn't end up using him. I ended up using a tragic John Gray who got destroyed by the Orioles just because I had the salary to get there, so why not? But I wish I had stuck with my initial build that had that kid in the FanDuel lineup at 55 or whatever it was, because he went out and had a day, huh? What was it, 8 innings, 6 strikeouts, something like that? It was a solid day. We could see a repeat performance of that, but I sincerely doubt it from Zach Plesac. I sincerely doubt it from Kenta Maeda. So really rough one there. Another fairly high total at 9 runs with meat on both sides. An actual good pitcher. One good one decidedly good one, and one better than average in this game. Logan Gilbert for the Mariners. Top of the board, 7-run total in this game. He's got the Twins down at just 3.37 despite all their quality this season. And then coming back the other way against that miserable Mariners offense, 3.71 implied runs for them going up against Bailey Ober. I think Ober's totally playable. Last time out, complete game, 2 runs, 4 hits, 10 strikeouts against Oakland. Similar type opponent. I could see a big day for Bailey. So both pitchers in that game are interesting. They're just going to be popular because everybody's looking there because of such a thin pitching board in such an obvious spot. Last 2 games up, Athletics and the Diamondbacks. 3.96 implied total for the Athletics going up against the D-backs, who do have a healthy 5.15 implied total, one of the highest marks on the board. It's Slate Ciccone going for the Diamondbacks, and I'm actually seeing a decent amount of power on the A's side. They were leading the power index today, the combined home run averages. I ended up making J.J. Bleday the home run pick of the day just because I didn't want to go back to Rooker. I don't think Langoliers is consistent enough to throw him in there. Bleday get a lefty back going up against Ciccone, who has had definite home run issues this season overall. I think it's an interesting spot to consider some A's bats, even with that low total. They're one of the more appealing low-end teams on the board. And then the Diamondbacks, just a pretty decent team. A lot of good hitters in that lineup, 5.15 implied runs. They're going up against J.P. Sears, who can be effective from time to time, but most of the time we're talking about like 3 or 4 earned runs with the upside to get blown up. Last time out, just an inning and a third against the Twins, gave up 8 earned runs on 9 hits, struck out 1, allowed a home run, and came out of the game. Start before that, he allowed 4 earned runs on 9 hits, including 3 home runs, struck out just 1 and walked 4 against that same Twins team. 5 innings, a 3-run ball against the Padres, so it's a lot of mixed quality from J.P. Sears. He fits right in with the theme of this slate. It wouldn't completely stun me to see him have a decent day against Arizona, but odds are that they come in at least somewhere between 4 and 5 here. Dodgers and the Giants to round things off. Another couple low totals here. Another very good pitcher in Logan Webb going for San Francisco. He's got the Dodgers at low home run numbers and checked down to just 3.74 implied runs in that game. Good pitching park. And then on the other side, 3.84 implied total for Landon Knack going up against the Giants. It's been all right. We'll at least take a look at him price-wise. This is his second start back after an absence. He was out the 19th to the 21st. I forget whether he just got sent down or whether that was an injury. But he's made some, reasonably effective starts this season. Low strikeout, low faith. But if he's cheap enough with a low run total in that ballpark against that team at the end of the night, might be worth considering as an SP2. We'll get right back to that discussion. Where does he come in? Let's see. Yeah, Landon Knack right there. Solidly in the middle of the board. That's not awful. What is awful is, and it's indicative of the quality of this slate today, the cut for pitching between like the guys around 30 on a FanDuel scale, around 15 plus on a DraftKings scale. A lot of the time that's in this kind of territory. It's midway down the board. Today it's here. Right? Logan Webb is the last man that's like believably in that territory. And then there's a gap. Stroman on FanDuel picks up a little bit closer. 14 points on DraftKings, 28.8 is a little bit higher than Drew Thorpe if we sorted by FanDuel. You could argue that he was in that spot as well, but I don't love Stroman for DFS anyway, and it's not a great opponent for DFS success. So he's a little bit challenging there. These guys facing one another as the top 2 options I think makes total sense, and again, I do think that they're totally worth it. They're your most likely pitchers to succeed, but that is a spot that's going to get popular for both of those guys. 10.599 for Logan Gilbert, happy to pay it. Bailey Ober for 98.88. Much nicer discount on the DraftKings slate, getting him 1,100 cheaper than the top of the board and significantly cheaper than the next 4 guys that follow and comparable to the guys in this range. So that's a very nice price on DraftKings. Should make him uber popular over there. FanDuel, just priced like he should be, 9,800. I think that's totally fair. Ronel Blanco, I definitely think we could see some success. I just don't love the pitcher overall. I don't think he's as good as his results have been this year. 96, 98 against a reasonably decent Mets lineup that has been kind of on a surge. I do think that there's reason to believe the Mets could get to him. I do think there's reason to believe that he could succeed. And on such a thin pitching slate, I think he's easily in the mix for shares. Charlie, I have belief. I have enough belief in Charlie that if I can afford him at 88 and take the discount from these guys, 1,000 less than Bailey Ober, he's facing the Pirates, who are decidedly mediocre. I have enough faith there that I could take that play. I'm probably going to see what this play looks like if I need to discount at pitcher and see what bats that difference buys me. 76 for Thorpe against Colorado is a different story than 8,800 for Charlie Morton against Pittsburgh, even though we don't know Drew Thorpe nearly as well. I mean, Charlie Morton's been in the league since Drew Thorpe was probably since right around when he was born. It's been a while. But I have enough belief in Drew Thorpe against that opponent that is an interesting discount on both sides, 7,300. I think Thorpe is also your top SP2 option on the DraftKings slate at that price. He certainly outpaces Stroman, Pivetta, Kikuchi behind him for a much higher price. I think he outpaces Slade Ciccone at 6,200, but you could argue that given another $1,100 discount on DraftKings, you could definitely make a strong argument that this plays even better than this does. So that's a conversation. It's less with Suarez. I really have a little bit of difficulty believing in Suarez, even at the 7,200. He's in play, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's offset from this one like this one might be. But he's in play there. On FanDuel at 72, it's a little light. Ciccone on FanDuel at 69, playable, similar. For a discount, similar discussion, to what we were just saying about DraftKings. Stroman is playable for the 87 on both sides. Pivetta, certainly playable against San Diego for 91.83 with a diminished version of San Diego. Kikuchi, you just got to run the risk of that lefty throwing some meatballs to some of those Yankees sluggers, and it gets problematic real quick. But 8,600, 8,500 for the ceiling, for the upside, for the general quality, not a bad price on a board like this. So Kikuchi's easily in play from the middle here. So while it does cut up here, your quality cut is probably Kikuchi. I think there's a quality difference. Apologies to Max Scherzer, who's just going to be limited a little bit by innings and opponent down there. I think there's a quality difference between everybody from Kikuchi up and everybody from Ciccone down, again, excluding Max Scherzer. So your quality line is probably there. Your projection line is believably there. And then you just get into a lot of swappable parts who project out really, really similarly. There's a range of, 14 pitchers projected between 21 and 24 on the FanDuel scale, between 10.2 and 12.6 on the DraftKings scale. All these guys down here are the same. It really boils down to that. So you can dance around the matchups and the prices and the popularity all you want. Some of these guys I have more faith in than others. I don't think we're getting to Max at 92, 91 just based on some innings. And, of course, the opponent is a little bit tough. But could he go out and succeed over 5 innings, maybe even get you to through the 6th? Absolutely. He's Max Scherzer. I have total faith in the talent. So it's limited a little bit by the price, potentially by the innings, the pitch count. Knack against San Francisco, again, we're going to have to look at that one a little bit. Just because of the price, he's decidedly in the middle of the board. I think he plays well enough against a mediocre San Francisco team with the benefit of the ballpark and the low total. So that one's at least somewhat intriguing. Kenta Maeda is just not the same guy as he used to be, 73, 71. It's an appropriate price. He projects out all right for that money, but you're just looking at an option in the middle of the board against an LA team that is very bad and certainly has strikeouts in it, but also has a little bit of frisky power in that lineup. So I don't think Maeda's safe. I think he gives you, a handful of innings with a handful of runs on top and probably doesn't get there on either side. If you're playing him, I think it's probably mostly done on DraftKings. Frankie Montas, I just don't think is good. 7,900, 6,500. He's very, very cheap. He is going up against a very mediocre and at the beginning of the season, just flat out bad St. Louis team. They've improved a little bit. I don't think we need to tangle with it. 7,900, I don't think he's necessarily cheap enough by comparison to a lot of the options above him in even better spots. Could Frankie Montas go out there and put up, 10 points on top of that median projection? Sure. He's good enough to do that. Same thing over here, not 10 points, but a handful of points. Could he get you 20 on DK for your 65? It's pretty thin, not frequently, but could he get there? Sure. So like he's on the board, and the price difference on DraftKings is different because the price difference between him and guys above him, he's a little bit cheaper than some of these guys relatively. So it's a little bit more playable here. A lot of these guys are going to end up in that boat, being just more playable on DraftKings. Taillon, again, was terrific in his most recent start. He's capable of putting up big ones. Typically, he's going out there and giving you fairly low strikeout outings. Maybe he gets through 5 or 6 decent innings. He's nobody's idea of a very high-end pitcher, but it's not like he's priced like it. It's just a tough opponent in Milwaukee. I don't love the spot. If I'm spending 83 on FanDuel, I'm probably trying to, do it here or spend less on one of these guys than target the Brewers with a middle-of-the-road type pitcher. Same thing on DK. I'm probably just spreading that out between some of those other shares. It wouldn't stun me if JP Sears won some upside, let's say. Not like won the day, but it wouldn't completely stun me if he had an okay start here. For 5,600, it's at worst a value dart that you can throw. He's had certainly good DFS days before, including this season. Just back on June 6th, he faced the Mariners. Gave up 2 earned runs on 3 hits, but struck out 8. He's been awful in his last 3. Just 1 strikeout in each of those 3 games with 7 walks across the 3 starts and 15 earned runs allowed in 10 2/3 innings against the Padres, against the Twins twice. Diamondbacks, probably not quite as good as the Twins, but it's a challenging opponent still. But that's an appealing enough price that you can, if you're building 150, you should roll those dice a few times. Colin Ray, decidedly in the bucket with a lot of these other guys. Again, all these guys from here down are like same. Colin Ray is very handily into that group of guys that are all the same. Facing the Cubs, not the ideal opponent, 7,500, 7,400. Colin Ray is a guy that we've targeted over time for some power allowed. So I'm more inclined to look at some Cubs bats in that one, but he's playable. Everybody from like Alec Marsh up, even maybe Andre Palante, is playable. It's just varying degrees of meh from like here down. Quintana, certainly not an ideal matchup against the Astros, who are low strikeout. They tend to get to pitchers like him quite a bit. 7,700, 7,600. He's priced like he's in this matchup, though. He's priced exactly right for Jose Quintana against the Astros, so you can play it. Not a lot of appeal. Probably going to be low owned. You can get away with that angle if you want. McKenzie, big total on the other side for Kansas City. Alec Marsh, big total on the other side for Cleveland. Both of these teams show quality in the model offensively. Either one of these guys has just enough to succeed on the right day, but you get kind of thin down here, and I'm just, again, more inclined to draw bats from that game. I might just go straight back and game stack that game again. I just like those two teams. I think they fit together fairly well. You have to make a sacrifice around, like, do you skip Sal? Do you skip Josh Naylor? Do you skip Vinny Pasquantino if you're trying to game stack that? Because of the fit, the positional fit. But there's appeal there. I don't love game stacking on a large slate, though. Zeroing in on one game that, like, all right, this one's going off for 20 runs. Rather than, all right, I'm going to take one of these two teams and I'm going to take the Red Sox or whoever, the very top of the board. Palante just showing some ability to keep the ball down as impacting Cincinnati's home run numbers. We'll take a look at that, but he's, again, another guy who's very, very cheap. Randy Vasquez pushing the highest run total on the slate, pitching in Excuse me. Pitching in Fenway Park. The price is very low. The opponent is very tough. Randy Vasquez not that good. Doesn't look like a great DFS spot. Martin Perez against the Braves. Second highest total on the board. Same thing. Doesn't look like a good DFS spot. Plesac, just no faith. Dakota Hudson, just no faith. Very, very low-end options from the bottom. I really don't see anyone succeeding with either of those pitchers today. Even as like an angle, even as like a leverage, game theory, whatever you want to call it, play. Seems pretty thin. Good chance Bryce Harper or Kyle Schwarber return before the All-Star break. When is the All-Star break? Oh, by the way, if you're a season-long player, James Wood, priority pickup He's going to be called up for, I believe, Monday's game. He's a Nationals slugger in the minors. Top prospect. The hell was I just going to look for? Well, it doesn't matter. First game up, Rangers and the Orioles. That's what I was going to look for, the lineups. Does not look like we have these lineups yet. When is the All-Star game? 16th? Tuesday, July 16th is the All-Star break. So 2 weeks for those two Phillies. Not too bad. Those of us who were attempting to potentially trade for Bryce Harper in our Dynasty League were a little bit concerned about that injury. So that's decent news. Still a tough trade to make, though. I'm not sure. All right, so Albert Suarez, 18.7% strikeouts, 9.6% walks so far this season. A 2.70 ERA, which is a little bit appealing on the surface, might lead people to make some mistakes here against a scuffling up and down kind of a Rangers team, given the low-ish run total that the Rangers are pulling today. Somebody sees that, combines it with, oh boy, this guy's been pitching well, a 2.70 ERA. That's spectacular. He's got an 11.4% swinging strike rate. Yeah, fine. 11.4 swinging, but 23.5% CSW, nearly a 10% walk rate, a sub 20 by a lot strikeout rate with that. 4.61 xFIP underneath the 2.70 ERA. He's just been good at limiting premium contact, limiting home runs and power, but he's getting away with that on a pretty aggressive launch angle. 15.6 degree average launches, nothing special there. He's just missed some barrels. A lot of happenstance baked in here. 89.2 miles an hour exit velo is not particularly low. 36.2% hard hits is good. He's avoided the hard hits. He's avoided the barrels. But that's over 53 and a third in 9 starts. There's definitely some happenstance in that. And going up against a team that can certainly, if nothing else, this Rangers team can barrel a ball. So I have limited faith, even at price, for 7,200 in Albert Suarez's ability to get through this. I do like their upside to, potentially get him 5, give him the win bonus. Last time out, he went 5, but he gave up 5 earned on 10 hits to Houston. Struck out just 3, walked 3. Struck out 3 and walked 5 against the Yankees over just 3 2/3. The game before that gave up 6 hits, 3 earned runs on 6 hits. Mediocre starts after mediocre start. 4 strikeouts, 3 walks against the Braves, but shut them out on 4 hits over 5 1/3. It's okay, I guess, for the money. They won him the game. If you get that start for your 7,200, are you happy with it on DraftKings? 5 1/3, 4 strikeouts, 3 walks, 4 hits, no runs, and got the win. I guess it's okay. It's not great. Strikeout high for the season is 6. That came all the way back on April 28th. Since then, 1 5 strikeout game and everything else 4 or below. Pretty limited. Maxey on the other side went 5 in the last game, faced 16 hitters, just 1 hit, struck out 4. That was against the pretty good Kansas City Royals. Not a bad appearance there. Do we have a pitch count on Max tonight? I don't see anything official about a pitch count. I just can't really imagine they're going to push him that much. Let's see. What does the DMN say? So it's thumb soreness in the debut that they took him out? I really got to think that we're limited in innings here for Max. Again, without an official pitch count, I don't want to throw a full blanket over the top of it and say that, that there's no upside here. But I think giving him just like, a limited innings count is pretty appropriate. It's a very tough opponent for one thing. He did throw a bullpen. So the story was he came out after 5 because he had soreness in his thumb in that first start back. And then he threw a bullpen midweek, said that his thumb was still sore and still hurt, but he's still making this start. It gets really shaky. 9,100, 9,200 in a vacuum would be a great price for Max Scherzer. If we were giving him full innings, he'd be inflated up to, the 30-ish range. He'd certainly be competitive in this kind of territory at worst. I just think, why do you want to take on the additional risk? Like, if I'm spending that money, I'd just so much rather have Logan Webb, even against the Dodgers at the end of the night. I'd rather have Charlie against the Pirates. Top guys on the board. Feels a little rough, especially considering the Orioles. If this was the A's or somebody on the other side, it would be a little bit easier to say, all right, even with 5 innings, upside to maybe 6, all right, we can get to max. Today, I don't really feel it as much. Obviously, he's tremendous. 28% strikeout rate, over 152 and 2/3 last year. 3.77 ERA with a 4.02 xFIP. 13.3% swinging strikes. Did give up a bunch of home runs last year. 4.51% home run rate is aggressive. But by and large, he's one of those guys that, they're home runs, but they're solo shots. They're 2-run shots. Don't really mean much, and he doesn't give up a ton of them in one game. It's just over time, stretched out across the full sample, one apiece across most of your games is going to get that number pretty high. But they're less damaging home runs than a lot of guys give up. Kind of like Garrett Cole. Outside of the games where Garrett Cole gives up 4 home runs. So Scherzer's a challenging spot for me. Let's look at some of the bats on the Rangers side. Semien and Seager continue to be very cheap. 54.52 on DK, 35.37 on FanDuel. Higher relative price on the FanDuel slate. But it's discounted, but it's not like extreme. It's not like what we were seeing the other day with like Carlos Correa or some of these guys, or for example Adolis Garcia being under 5,000 on DraftKings today at 4,700. Even with his struggles, that's a $5,000 player. So you're getting a discount on the 2 middle infielders who are both dynamite. They're both underperformed a little bit their talent levels for this season, but I think we're dealing still with just a half a season's worth of plate appearances. I think there's big upside for both of those players. Seager's got 14 home runs. Semien's got 11. 98 WRC plus for the second baseman, 115 WRC plus for the shortstop. Josh Smith for 41.32 seems like a bargain still. 298, 391, 467, a 145 WRC plus. Not the best power bat in the world, but certainly capable of getting on base. Correlated scoring with Semien and Seager above. Adolis Garcia, Wyatt Langford, Nathaniel Lowe behind. Makes a lot of sense to include Josh Smith in your stacks. He's very affordable in the infield. Adolis Garcia, again, very cheap at 4,700 for the upside. 13.5% barrels, 45.7% hard hits. At the very least, still making good contact. He hit his 15th home run last night, 6 stolen bases, 194 ISO. The power's down a little bit, but still there. The rest of the quality's kind of evaporated around him. The average, the on-base are way down. The WRC plus went down alongside those. But another player that could absolutely have a monster second half. The talent is still easily there. So just get him while he's cheap. Wyatt Langford for 39, 3,000, 3 home runs, 7 steals, and 84 WRC plus. Nathaniel Lowe, also very cheap. Solid lefty bat against a mediocre righty. I could see Nathaniel Lowe having a decent day here. Just 256, 346, 348. The on base is very good. Keeps him at league average for run creation right now. But this is an underperforming 240 plate appearances out of Nathaniel Lowe. He's got significant upside beyond that as a hitter. A little bit more power than that. Certainly more run creation given the on-base skills. Jonah Heim for 36, a playable catcher, 7 home runs with a 109 ISO. That is, even with these low contact marks, it's a little bit misaligned to just have a 109 ISO. Not a lot of success there. The 7 home runs are playable. Derek Hill for the Deadman, if he's in the lineup again, 2,100 on FanDuel. A playable piece. We looked at him yesterday. A little bit of like an on-base speed upside kind of a guy. Kind of like a Leody Taveras in the bottom spot. 2,725 for Leody. He's got 5 home runs, 8 stolen bases. Just a 74 WRC plus. Pretty limited slash line. So it's mostly the top 6 if you're looking at the Rangers. But there's some good mix and match pieces, and everybody's at least a little bit cheaper than they should be up top. Especially given the pitching opponent. For the Orioles, it's a taller order to succeed, even if Max is going 5. That's 5 innings of Max Scherzer you've got to contend with. So it's a little bit more limited there. You can still see Gunnar, major opportunity for power, 14.06 in the home run model. And you can see these guys not far behind the magic number either, given some of the power that Scherzer's allowed of late. So a little bit of upside shining through for the Orioles there. They're at, what was it, a 4.47 implied total? So I do think they're playable. They're probably not going to be crazy popular against Max in this spot. Might make them sneaky. Might be a good day, actually, despite the fact that they're facing Max for a minute. Might be a good day to maybe consider some lower-owned, sneakier Orioles. Gunnar's appropriately very, very expensive. Adley Rutschman is pretty expensive. 5,800 on DraftKings makes a lot of sense where you have to play catchers. 34 on FanDuel seems a little bit generous. He could easily be 36, 38 over there without a question. 300, 351, 479, 15 home runs, a 136 ISO. Gunner's got a 325 ISO, 181 WRC plus, 26 homers, and 13 steals. Putting up Judgian numbers with a little bit of speed this season from the shortstop spot. Killer player. Ryan O'Hearn for 38, 3,000 just continues to be underpriced. 10 home runs, 283, 342, 466. He's created runs 30% better than average. He makes pretty good contact and has for the last season and a half. First and outfield eligible on both sides. Very solid mix and match piece in the heart of this Orioles lineup. Santander, 21 home runs out of him so far this year, 270 ISO, pretty killer opportunity for 4,800, 3,500 to just buy a little bit of power. Second highest home run mark on the board on the team, 9.23. He's no slouch for power upside even against Max. Jordan Westberg, 5,000, 3,300 multi-position on both sides, very easy to play, 13 home runs from him, 230 ISO, a 140 WRC plus, over 312 excellent plate appearances, 10.9% barrels, 48.4% hard hits. Jordan Westberg jumped into the lineup at the end of spring training or broke camp with the team as a good but underappreciated by comparison to the guys around him as prospects, the Jackson Holidays, the Easton Kjerstads of the world, the Colton Cowsers, even the Connor Norbys of the world. Westberg's been the guy who got in here day one with the Major League squad this year and has succeeded wire to wire over the first half of the season. He's been excellent. Speaking of Kjerstad, back in the lineup, 2,200, 2,400 across sites. Hit a home run yesterday, had a big day. Definitely a part of the plans right now for the Orioles. Squeezing out Colton Cowser a little bit. Jorge Mateo, 37, 28, multi-position eligible. Has 5 home runs and 12 stolen bases, a 208 ISO. A lot of mediocrity to come, gets mixed in with maybe it's going to be more of just a blend of some good days, some bad days, rather than here's 25 good days, and then I'm not going to do anything the rest of the season like what he gave us last year. So maybe it'll be more mixed and ongoing this year from Mateo. He's a low-faith, high-upside option. Cedric Mullins also fairly similar in terms of you're just trying to buy some counting stats out of Mullins. 9 home runs and 16 steals is good. A 176 ISO, not great, but playable. 88 WRC plus reflects the inconsistency, the general lack of quality. But in any given slate sense, 35-29 is a pretty fair price to pay for a guy who's a former 30-30 player with upside to 20 and 20-25 season, 18-25, somewhere in that territory. Maybe like 15-30 is more accurate. A lot of upside still fantasy-wise for Cedric Mullins. James McCann at the bottom of the lineup. If he's in there, mix and match piece at catcher at best. So probably looking at it, Orioles bats followed by Rangers bats followed by, if you have to play a pitcher from this game, it's Max, but you're probably not getting enough juice out of him. Don't really like Suarez on the other side, but he is cheap. He's in that mix of everybody's the same in this range kind of pitchers. Haven't been following along in chat. Let me jump back in, see if you guys are shouting at me about anything. James Woods, the actor. Ronald Reagan, the actor? You guys know that quote, I'm sure. Regardless of your age, I'm certain that everyone in this chat has seen Back to the Future. Right? That's one that just everybody sees, right? It's somewhere along the way. That movie hasn't aged out. That movie hasn't been like, yeah, it's a 40-year-old movie now, so if you were thinking about it when you were, when it came out in 1985, that would be a movie from the 40s. Well, yeah, all right, fine, screw you. Some of us are old. Some of us felt really old the other day when Derek Jeter turned 50 and LeBron James's son was in the NBA draft on the same day. Out of everything that I've ever experienced, that might have been the thing that made me feel the oldest. Dennis, greatest trilogy of all time for the Back to the Future movies. I gotta say it's up there. It is most certainly up there. 3 is the lightest entry, obviously. But even 3 is enjoyable. Ties up the story. First 2 were spectacular. First one especially is an all-time classic. Mama loves Marty McFly. Dimitri's a 90s baby. Not sure if I apply. Does that mean you haven't seen, as a 90s baby, you haven't seen Back to the Future? I find that impossible. Steven, I felt old longer than that. Honestly, I don't feel old. Like, I don't have I get up and everything hurts and, I'm 45 and, oh boy, I feel it. Like, like some people talk. I don't have any of that. And it's not because I exercise or stay in shape or anything like that. I guess, some luck. And certainly up here, still the same dumbass, like 15-year-old. But yeah, things like that make me realize, like, oh shit, yeah, actually I'm getting old. Dimitri said, oh, Back to the Future. Yeah, see, there you go. I told you. Randy Leeson, any games tonight that will be affected by weather? Yes. We talked about it at the very top of the show, but just I'll run through it again real quick. And this, again, credit to Kevin Roth over at RG. That's whose weather reports we use, and I encourage everybody to just follow him on Twitter and pick up his free reports. Pick up the free reports over at Roto Grinders. You don't necessarily need to subscribe, but he is good at the DFS weather thing. So from his free reports, the White Sox game, the Rockies at White Sox, is definitely problematic. He says basically it's going to rain at some point. It's probably going to be light rain, so it might be a situation where they try and play in light rain, or maybe they try and delay, play through, find 6 innings somewhere. But there is a possibility that one just gets washed. So that one is definitely a spot to keep an eye on, which is a shame because we do like cheap Drew Thorpe in that game. Pirates at the Braves, just the usual Atlanta thunderstorms issue. So it's a threat, but it's one that we'll probably have figured out by game time. And then the Midwest games, Kansas City, Cleveland at Kansas City, says there's a lot of storms probably popping up after the game, but that could impact late in the game, obviously. But that probably eliminates any risk around the starting pitchers. That said, we're looking at that more for offense in that game, I think. So maybe late in the game you get a little bit of weather, and hopefully they just play through or whatever. Cincinnati at St. Louis looks like the best out of the 4 concerning games. The way he reads it is spotty showers around the ballpark, might pop in for a brief delay, but should be fine. So yes, I would say the most threatened game is that White Sox and Rockies game. All right, let's talk Kikuchi against the Yankees. Do we have the Yanks yet? Yanks will probably be something like this. So Kikuchi, when he's not giving up home runs, is typically pretty decent. 24.2% strikeout rate, a 4.0 ERA, but the decency reflected by the 3.34 xFIP. The problems crop up around the premium contact that he allows. 9.6% barrels this year, 43.4% hard hits, 90.4 miles an hour of exit velo. Both of those are over the numbers that we're typically looking for. This is an aggressively high barrel rate. He's a fly ball trajectory pitcher. He's managed it this year, just a 3.10 home run rate. Last year it was 3.86. The year before it was a very ugly 5.07. We were targeting him pretty regularly. This was a really rough year. Outside of the higher strikeout rate, he was bad across the board that year. Higher walks, way more power allowed. Wrangled it a little bit last season and has continued to do that, but he's still gettable for power upside. You can see Stuff Plus, 10 points above average. He does have good stuff. Doesn't walk that many guys this year, down to 5.6% so far. 29.3% CSW is a good strike thrower, good at inducing swinging strikes. I could absolutely see him having a successful day against these Yankees. I think he's on the board at 8,500, 8,600, and he's on the board above that pool of guys. The sames basically start here. I'm going to put a line on that. Everybody orange. Everybody between... let's end it here. Everybody between the orange lines, including the guys on the orange lines, is essentially the same, with apologies to Max Scherzer. Kikuchi's just above that threshold. I think he's got a little bit more ceiling than a lot of these guys on the right night. He's absolutely threatened, though, by Yankees' power, especially these two monsters. 15.84 for Soto, 18.46 to lead the day for Judge in the home run model. There's a lot of power showing there, and then you've got some good power numbers for the rest of these guys. 3 guys in the 6s, Volpe up at 7.60. It's just a question of, all right, do those home runs come after Volpe singled, Soto drew a walk, and then Judge hits a 3-run shot? And then Glaber, if he's back in the lineup, let's say he gets on and Verdugo gets on, and then J.D. Davis hits another 3-run shot, and these guys are off and running. Maybe that doesn't happen to back-to-back, but you get me. Are we combining factors? Are we adding up to a good stack here, or are we just looking at a couple of solo or a couple of 2-run home runs and a mediocre stacking day? And that's really how it's going to break down a lot with these Yankees, especially with this thinned out version of the Yankees lineup that kind of dies on the vine a lot of the time and doesn't turn the lineup over in an inning and keep a rally going. It could be a day also where if those home runs don't come through and these guys are getting on base, you could see, and you do see some of the time, the Yankees tend to leave a lot of runners on base because they're good at getting on base by and large. So we'll see, but the Yanks are in play. Kikuchi's in play. Going the other way, Stroman, not our favorite DFS pitcher. 3.15 ERA is good, but a 4.62 xFIP is probably more truthful. Maybe somewhere in between, like call it like a 4.15, but when everything's said and done, basically a full run higher than his current ERA. You can see Stuff Plus doesn't really like him, but what he's typically good at is inducing weak contact, keeping the ball in the yard. This year it's gone up a little bit in terms of home runs allowed, basically doubled from last year, up from 2 years ago a little bit. Giving up a little bit more barrel, a lot more launch. This is a non-tragic launch angle, but by comparison to a 3-degree average launch angle or a 7-degree average launch angle the year before, you can see where the additional home runs have come from. It's been pretty good at inducing weak, medium contact anyway, 37.5% hard hits, 89.4 miles an hour of exit velo. He's an effective pitcher. He's a talented pitcher. It's just not a great DFS option, and he's going up against a Blue Jays lineup that has an 18.1% strikeout rate against his just 17.6. He's also walking 10.5% this year, which is up from previous seasons. So he's gotten away with a lot. Could continue to get away with a lot tonight. I think 6 innings is in play for Stroman. He's given pretty decent depth in a lot of starts this year. 6 2/3 in his most recent outing against the Braves. Gave up 3 runs, 2 homers, struck out 6, walked 2. It's a quality start. He got the win. Depending on where he was priced, that's a borderline successful FanDuel day. It's not Slate winning on a gigantic day like this with 26 options, but it keeps you in play. 3 starts in a row before that, failed to complete the 6th inning, but then 4 starts before those, he did complete the 6th inning with a quality start in each one, only allowed 2 earned runs over the 4 starts. Really just a couple bad ones. He's had a handful of 4-run games through the season. 1, 2, 3, 4 4-run games. And then a 5-run game. But the 5-run game came on June 6th against the Twins. That's his worst game of the season. It's just you combine some of those days of 3, 4 runs with low strikeout output, and it really hampers your DFS upside. So I just think he's high priced, 8,700. He is above the threshold. He is not same with all these guys. He's got a little bit more juice than that. But not a great opponent, and among the guys up here, he's probably got the lowest ceiling, maybe Drew Thorpe. So the ceiling is questionable, and there's an obvious price difference between those two. If you're looking at Blue Jays bats with their confirmed version of the lineup, Bo Bichette back at the top of the lineup, 4,500, 2,800, continues to just be absurdly cheap. Just ignore these 287 plate appearances, which is, increasingly challenging to say or to advise somebody to do or to even do myself as we get to, a halfway point in a season. But I'm inclined to remember the Bo Bichette. The creator runs 25% better than average over 601 plate appearances while slashing 306, 339, 475, hitting 20 home runs. The guy who created runs 29% better than average the year before while slashing 290, 333, 469, 24 home runs, 13 stolen bases. That guy's not gone. He's just missed some barrels this year. A lot of those hits, a lot of that power, a lot of those extra base hits, and just the ability to be on base disappear around just missing some contact. The barrel rate's been cut in half. The hard hits are right where they're supposed to be. The strikeouts are down. The walks are up. This is like what we were saying with Frankie Lindor a month ago, 2 months ago. I don't think he's all that far gone, despite the just abysmal results so far. And this has been a longer stretch of being worse than Frankie Lindor was. I get it, but I do see the potential. I do see the upside, especially when he's going to be this cheap. 2,800, 4,500. It's a bargain. Spencer Horwitz for 39, 28, first and second base eligible on both sides, giving you a very effective 60 plate appearances so far. His reputation is a guy who is very, very good at getting on base, has medium kind of power, but excellent on base. So strong correlated scoring play. 340, 483, 511 so far. Vladdy for just 4,700 continues to be underpriced. 11 home runs, 289, 370, 447, a 136 WRC plus. He's having a very good year. Can you honestly believe that Vladdy's not getting to 25 home runs? Or 23, 24? Like I was saying yesterday, I don't think any of us were expecting 40 home runs out of him this year. I think maybe he had that reputation for being that kind of a power bat. Maybe we're expecting 30. But I don't think we're far off the mark, and he's given you a lot of quality in every single other aspect of the game, outside of a little bit of loss of extra base hits, a little bit of loss of home runs. Everything else has been totally fine. And he's cheap. He's going up against Marcus Stroman. I don't get it. Justin Turner, 36, 26, has been pretty rough, but does have upside, a lot of premium contact, a lot of frequent contact and the ability to draw a walk. More of a correlated scoring piece based on his ability to get on base. Probably not an ideal fit in the cleanup spot, but a mix and match option for cheap at worst. George Springer, 37, 27. He homered twice yesterday, up to 8 homers, 8 steals now. At least there's signs of life. He was sub Mendoza when we talked about him yesterday. Now he's at 204, 289, 327. So a little bit of life out of Springer. Still very, very cheap. Would not skip him if I'm stacking up Blue Jays. Dalton Varsho, 43, 29. Lefty bat with a decent amount of power. 11 home runs, a 215 ISO. Dead on league average for run creation. Danny Jansen, my preferred catcher in this lineup for power upside. 5 home runs, a 179 ISO over 179 plate appearances. Not great for power, but more believable and some good premium contact numbers over the last 2 seasons, and also pretty low strikeout. Addison Barger, a mix and match piece from the bottom. And then IKF, a 4-position eligible $2,600 option on FanDuel who can put the ball in play, can help them turn the lineup over. 283 average and a 332 on base. He's doing that this year. He's a correlated scoring option as a wraparound play. I don't really like it at 3,100 shortstop only on DraftKings. For one, it's a positional blocker to Bo Bichette. And then it's also a positional blocker to just a lot more quality at shortstop from other teams. So I don't love him there. Where you can move him around the board a little bit for a cheap price on FanDuel, he's all right. If you're looking at Yankees, these two are obvious. And I certainly think we can look at Yankees here. If you're building 150 stacks out, given the power upside that they could show against Kikuchi, you definitely want to have a little space carved out for Yankees. You might not get completely over the top. They are at a low run total, especially for them. They've been kind of scuffling through June, definitely depleted by injuries. But I think you want to have a little bit, because if you get the bad Kikuchi, that goes bad in a hurry, and he has some meltdown type performance. Volpe for 47, 33, 6 home runs, 15 steals, getting on at a 323 clip, which is, again, a little bit light. Needs to improve that a little bit to maintain quality, but just the best correlated scoring spot in baseball ahead of Soto and Judge. Either one of those guys, 19 homers for Soto, 30 for Judge, 261, 398 ISOs, 183, 211 WRC pluses. Don't think I need to sell those guys too hard. Glaber, if he's in the lineup, 39, 28, took a few days off. Hopefully it corrects his head and he gets things going. 7 home runs, 4 steals. Everything else has been pretty bad for Glaber this year. But a player, a righty bat that I do like and would be a killer spot if he's hitting fourth through 6th. He definitely has appeal if he's hitting in one of those spots. Verdugo, lefty, definitely a little bit of a slip there, and he's been in a decline over the last month or so. Still playable, still cheap, but not quite as good an option as he was 3-4 weeks ago. J.D. Davis, very interesting against the lefty, 3,200, 2,300. Tons of barrels, tons of hard hits out of J.D. Davis. It's what he does well. 6.38 in the home run model. Believable power upside against a lefty who gives up a lot of premium contact and is vulnerable to right-handed power. I think J.D. Davis is a sneaky little play at 2,300 third base, first base on FanDuel. A little bit less so at 32 on DraftKings, just a slight bit harder to fit at that price. But still, the same thing applies. He's going to be a low-owned, sneaky power option that me and 4 other people are going to want to play. LeMahieu for 33-24 has been really bad. Sub Mendoza over 85 plate appearances. Mike Jones is a replacement level player. If he's in the lineup, he's highly skippable. He's a cheap square in a Yankee stack. If you needed, for whatever reason, I want that 4th or 5th hitter in there and I need to use somebody super cheap. He'd be there if he's in the lineup, but it's pretty limited. And then Trevino, if he's catching tonight, presumably he is against the lefty. 8 home runs on the season, a 160 ISO, 103 WRC plus. He's had an effective season with the bat. He's not this good of a hitter. This is a high power number for him, but he's been effective. He's a cheap catcher. It is probably Man, it's like tied on all four fronts. All four of these things are playable. All four of these things are equal. I don't really have a strong lean Stroman or Kikuchi, because I think, Stroman against the Blue Jays, similar downside, similar upside. Kikuchi against the Yankees, probably a bigger downside, but a higher upside. So that basically evens out to about a tie in my head. They're the same prices. And then Blue Jays against Stro. I guess I lean a little bit, and I'll do this while I say it. I lean a little bit Yankees bats, still with the power up at the top and the two best players in the game up at the top. But it's a pretty thin look in the Yankees lineup. So all four things playable, all four things about a tie. And you could easily say these two guys, and maybe it's like this group here is another group of these four guys are kind of same. And then this group of guys is kind of same. So it's like 1 block, 2 block, 3 block. Actually, Logan Webb should have been in the top one. Really interesting the way the pitching slate breaks down that way. Got to keep on moving. Here's Pivetta against Randy Vasquez. So the Red Sox are showing the top upside overall for fantasy scoring on the board. They've got the highest implied run total on the board. A lot of power showing in the heart of the lineup around Rafi Devers and Tyler O'Neill again. Both of those guys have 16 home runs apiece, 272 and a 287 ISO. Both of them more than 40% above average, more than 45% above average for run creation. The Red Sox have only 3 guys in the confirmed version of the lineup that are below average for run creation so far this season. One of them is Masataka Yoshida, who is a tremendous hitter and will, with more plate appearances, almost assuredly be above average for run creation. The rest of the guys believably below, but it's a very, very good Red Sox lineup, even with a couple missing parts still. So throwing him up against Vasquez, who's got a 14.6% strikeout rate over 47 2/3 in 10 starts, who's got a 5.10 ERA and a 4.57 xFIP, who's given up all this premium contact and power so far. The one thing he's got going for him is an 8 points above average rating by Stuff Plus for the full arsenal, but the whip sucks. I guess he's not walking that many guys, but he's not inducing swinging strikes. He's not throwing many strikes. To only be walking 5.6% while throwing at 22.1% CSW is actually a little bit impressive. But this is nobody's idea of a good pitcher. He is almost definitely just a target on this slate. I don't think you're paying 6 for him on DK. I don't think you're paying 7 for him on FanDuel. Pivetta is more on the board. 8,300 on DK. Seems a little bit light for a Padres opponent that doesn't have Fernando Tatis in the lineup. It feels pretty generous. Let me grab the Pods lineup here. So Pivetta's got over 57 2/3 and 11 starts this year, a 4.06 ERA, but a 3.55 xFIP that looks a lot better. 10.9% swinging strike rate is okay to good, but 25.8% CSW is not that great. Not throwing as many strikes as he needs to be. Giving up a little bit in terms of barrels. He's a fly ball trajectory pitcher, which has resulted in some home runs. This is a very inflated home run mark. But you can see that's come on an 89.3 miles an hour non-tragic exit velo number, 36.5% hard hits. So we just kind of lost a few fly balls along the way. And Pivetta's a pitcher who I'll forgive that for. A little bit of happenstance baked in there. 2 against the Reds in his most recent outing, 2 against the Blue Jays in the start before that. He's had a few bumpy ones in a row. Gave up 3 starts back. He faced Philly in Boston, gave up 4 earned on 6 hits, struck out only 4 and walked 4, didn't give up a homer. And then the 2 home run start against Toronto was in Toronto. He ended up going 7 in that one, just gave up 3 earned runs on 9 hits, got the quality start, got the win, struck out just 4, walked 1. So it was really just the 2 home runs, a little bit of a bump there, a couple of mistakes. Same kind of a thing against Cincinnati. He only went 4 1/3 in that one. He struck out 5, walked 1, 2 homers allowed, but just 3 earned runs. Missed the quality start, obviously, not completing even the 5th, let alone the 6th. Missed the win bonus as well. But that's not really typical of him. He's got a couple few short starts in here. He's completed the 7th twice. Completed the 6th 2 other times. Pitched into the 6th 2 times on top of that. Not the most reliable option for the quality start, but certainly some upside. This version of the Padres lineup is greatly diminished for power upside what Fernando Tatis brings, but they're still fairly decent quality. 18.1% strikeout across this lineup. That's including Higgy at 34.4. If you skipped him, not that he's not in the lineup, but if you just took that sample out, 16% strikeout rate. Higgy is high strikeout, but he was 6 points lower last year. So the rest of these guys are all decidedly low strikeout. To even that out, let's take Luis Arias at the very top. We'll drop the top highest and the lowest. 17.5. So it's an effectively low strikeout squad, but Pivetta is good enough at 27.2% to find a couple along the way. Luis Arias is one of the best table setters in baseball. 310, 345, 383 this year, 111 WRC plus. He's just setting the table for kind of lighter eaters behind him with no Tatis. He's got Jurickson Profar and Jake Cronenworth now. You guys know where I was at the start of the season on those two hitters. I've come around a little bit. Obviously, Profar's been having a great season over half a season. He's at 316, 408, 484. He's got 11 home runs. 168 ISO is mediocre. 160 WRC plus is obviously fantastic. Doesn't strike out, draws a bunch of walks. He's been good, but still it's Jurickson Profar. It's not Fernando Tatis. Jake Cronenworth is Jake Cronenworth. 12 home runs, great. I made him the home run pick from the Padres today. 7.06 in the model. He's been good over 345. He's outperformed my expectations. But we're still only looking at 264, 328, 450. 12 homers is great. 186 ISO is all right. 125 WRC plus is terrific. Low strikeout, medium walk. It's Jake Cronenworth. It's not Aaron Judge in that spot. Manny Machado. I do still think that Manny Machado, somewhere in there is Manny Machado, but it's been bumpy this year. 264, 316, 390, just a 127 ISO, 8 home runs over 316 plate appearances. That's despite a 47.3% hard hit rate. You could say the same about Manny, that just some of the home runs, some of the ISO, the extra base hits, have just been lost to a little bit of a slip in barrels, which is a little bit of riding some happenstance up or down. That could absolutely reverse over the next 300 and change plate appearances, and he could end up with a pretty strong season. 59-32. 59 feels a little heavy for this version of Manny, though. 32 is about right on FanDuel. That's a weird one. DK went oddly high with Machado, and it's not like they've had him priced up here. They priced him up after Tatis came out of this lineup, I guess. That's weird. Donovan Solano for 31.25, a mix and match piece for cheap pricing. Decent line drive hitter, decent at getting on base, 351 on base over 134 plate appearances, 120 WRC plus, but nobody's idea of a big threat. Jackson Merrill, solid contact hitter, 43.5% hard hits and 8.3% barrels, gives them upside for power, extra base knocks. That said, a 149 ISO is not overly impressive for that kind of a contact rate. 284, 324, 33. He's got a great slash line. He's got 10 home runs, 9 stolen bases. He's created runs 17% better than average. One of, if not the top rookie in the National League right now. But again, not the biggest threat in the world. For Nick Pivetta, Nick Pavetta's seen many hitters like Jackson Merrill. Ha-Seong Kim for 51, 3,000, just suffering from bad batting average, but 10 home runs, 15 stolen bases already, on his way to a 20-30 kind of a season, 110 WRC plus. Very easy to play at shortstop on either side for a fair price. Kyle Higashioka, you guys know I love Higgy as a secret sneaky catcher. In 96 plate appearances, Higgy's already up to 8 home runs. I don't care about that. I don't care about that. I care about the slug. I care about the ISO significantly, and I care greatly about the premium contact, which with this catcher has always been quietly terrific. Last year, 11.1% barrels, 48.3% hard hits. The year before, 9.8 and 48.1. This year, in, again, fewer than 100 plate appearances, 15.3 and 42.4. He is 8/10 or some people might say 4/5 of the way to his home run total from each of the last 2 years already in just 96 plate appearances. He hit 10 each of the last 2 years in 260 and 248. We're way ahead of the pace for Higgy's home run output. If he was getting, he's now getting everyday opportunities with Campusano out. He's a quality catcher power bat. He's not anything beyond that. But if you're playing Padres, especially on DraftKings, Kyle Higashioka belongs in your lineups. Especially against this pitcher who's given up this much home run upside in this ballpark. Kyle Higashioka belongs in your lineups if you're playing Padres. Bryce Johnson, a lot less so. 11 mediocre plate appearances this year, 48 mediocre plate appearances last year, 19 mediocre plate appearances the year before, and mediocre's being awfully kind to those plate appearances. Not that good. If you're going to the Red Sox, which I think is a really good idea in this spot, even with popularity. I mentioned the two monsters lurking in the middle of the lineup with all the home run upside and all the power that they've shown. We've got a lot of quality around these guys now. Starting from the bottom or from like the middle part of the lineup, I mentioned Yoshida because he's 20 points below average for run creation over 133, and he's kind of scuffling along in the triple slash. But just to mention it again, yesterday I highlighted this. 289, 338, 445 with a 109 WRC plus, 15 homers, 8 steals in 580 plate appearances in his first season in the major leagues last year. He was very, very good, and now he just costs 3,100, 2,700 as a lefty bat with a decent amount of power and extra base upside going up against a very mediocre righty. I really like the spot for Yoshida as a cheap later lineup option. If you're stacking the heart of the lineup, it makes a ton of sense to bolt into that. Connor Wong for 37-31, having a dynamite season over 223 plate appearances. He's one home run behind Kyle Higashioka, though, in significantly more plate appearances. But he's been stellar with the bat, doing unexpected things. I was looking at him more as like this type of a hitter who's got some power upside. But this year he's really put it all together effectively. 143 WRC plus is third on the team behind the two sluggers in the middle of the lineup. So Wong's really playable, really interesting bat as well. Dom Smith, I don't think much of, 28-27. He's got 3 home runs, but he's pretty bad. Ceddanne Rafaela, a little bit of upside for counting stats, 8 homers, 10 steals, a lot of positional flex for 29 on FanDuel, a little bit of 32 on DraftKings, but he's a low-end shortstop and just another outfielder for that price, where this makes him a little bit more interesting, I think. Just the ability to flex him around the board, use him wherever you want him. At the top of the Red Sox lineup is where there's a lot of quality. They're rolling 4 lefties off the top again. They've been doing this a little bit lately. Jarren Duran's terrific, 7 home runs, 20 steals. We have David Hamilton with 5 home runs and 21 steals, hot on the heels of Jarren Duran's number in half the plate appearances so far. 192 ISO for Duran, 166 for Hamilton, 128 and 115 WRC plus. Both guys can get on. Both guys can steal bags. Both guys have a little bit of lefty pop in their bats. You get Hamilton at short or second on FanDuel for just 31. Just 42 at short is dynamite on DraftKings. He's not like the top shortstop option on talent on the board, but given that price and given the quality of this stack today, that's going to be a really interesting player who I expect probably gets pretty popular there. Wilyer Abreu for 41-33. Maybe falls a little bit by the wayside. Like if people are going outfielder, shortstop, third base, another outfielder, and then you're deciding, all right, do I want $4,100 Abreu or do I include $3,100 Yoshida, who Terry and a bunch of other touts probably around the industry told me was good, and who I saw last year and know is good. You know, I don't want to discredit you guys in your baseball knowledge. So I do think a lot of people probably make that click, or they go to Wong and just book the catcher there rather than booking the third outfield spot. So it just kind of makes it interesting to think about just straight line it, use all 3 outfielders with Hamilton and Devers. I suspect that Abreu, especially for the cheap price, given his quality, might be the under-owned guy. He's going to be popular, but might be, by comparison to the other guys in the top 6, the under-owned man there. Maybe. 11.6% barrels, 47.3% hard hits, 6 home runs, 260, 332, 464 with a 204 ISO, 119 mark for run creation over 202. He's been very, very good. And then to start and finish with these two guys, they're both terrific. They both have above average marks for home run upside, 50 points, 50% plus hard hits, monster barrel rates. They're tremendous. Red Sox bats way up top, followed by Nick Pivetta. Close on his heels, though, those Padres bats. Pivetta is decidedly in this exact group of pitchers. I'll put Drew Thorpe in there, especially with the weather concerns, but he is at least offset by price. But this is another block of pitchers who look very much the same for similar prices. Here's Drew Thorpe. So why do I like Drew Thorpe? Given a 5.02 ERA, a 5.90 xFIP, a 13.6% strikeout rate, and a 16.7% walk rate so far in his 3 starts in the show. A lot of faith, a lot of belief in the talent level. A lot of belief in a pitcher with a plus changeup that is widely regarded as one of the best pitches in the minor leagues, and a kid who has over the last few seasons put up one of the best strikeout to walk ratios in all of professional baseball. It's been bumpy in the show so far. He might be a little bit early. This is the White Sox we're dealing with. First start, he faced the Mariners. I was all over him that day. He struck out 4, walked 2, gave up just 1 earned run on 3 hits over 5 innings. Really needed to complete that 6th inning for me on FanDuel, and then they lost the game for him later on, so neither bonus. But that was an okay start. That was effective. Melted down in the second one against the Diamondbacks. Gave up 7 earned runs on 6 hits, only went 3 1/3, faced 21 hitters, struck out 0 and walked 5, gave up a home run. That's a disaster, obviously. The most recent start, though, faced the Tigers. The only downside is that he walked 4 hitters, but he completed 6 innings. He got the quality start because he gave up no runs. He got the win bonus, which is very odd and random with the White Sox in play. He struck out 5, gave up 2 hits. Outside of the 4 walks, that's an excellent start. And the 4 walks didn't hurt him. Granted, that's the Tigers on the other side, but today it's the Rockies on the other side who are worse than the Tigers. Or, well, maybe not. Man for man, this is probably actually a better lineup. They're performing just as bad as the Tigers, but this is probably a little bit better, depending on who's in it on a day-to-day basis. With Jacob Stallings, well, Jacob Stallings has been good. With Jake Cave, Sam Hilliard down the bottom of the lineup, I just like the Hunter Goodman version of this lineup better at the bottom. So assuming this game plays, there is, again, weather in the area. They might have to get wet to get this one complete, but it's supposed to be light rain, so it's that kind of day where it's like, you see sheets of rain on TV, but when you go there live, it's actually just, ongoing drizzle, but easy enough to play through. Does it affect a rookie pitcher? Who the hell knows? There's no way I can quantify that. I think Drew Thorpe here, 476.73, is, if this game plays, the top value option on both sites. It's the Rockies on the road against a righty. That has been an ongoing theme for years, and it has been proven again this year to be very effective. Just to look at this team anytime they go on the road, and you can get a righty against them, even a mediocre righty, you can see a lot of success approaching it that way. Got a bunch of lefties in there, a couple switch hitters in there today. But Thorpe is good enough to beat this team. He's also inexperienced enough and has been shaky enough to lose badly to this team. It's a gamble. Nobody's saying he's safe, but I love him at the price. Dakota Hudson on the other side, you can see a sub-20 projection on FanDuel, sub-10 projection on DraftKings. Even against the lousy White Sox, I really don't see it. 11.9% strikeout rate, 11% walk rate over 76 2/3, 15 starts, a 5.63 ERA, a 5.20 xFIP. A lot of hard hit balls. The one thing, again, I'll continue to harp on it all year with Dakota Hudson, is he does cut launch angle. He does limit home run upside a little bit. And that is historically true. All right, so he's good at keeping the ball down, keeping the ball in the yard. That could equal a semi-successful day in which he goes 5 or 6 innings, keeps them mostly off the board, but it's going to probably come with a few runs, enough runs, and just no strikeout equity that it doesn't really pay that off. I don't think you roll those dice. Definitely not here. I do think that it could have a limiting impact on a White Sox club that's drawing a 4.46 implied total. That is a beefy total for one of the worst teams in baseball. How many times have the White Sox scored 5 runs this year? Can't be that many. I'll see if I can just get the answer by Googling it. Nope. I'm not going to sit here and count up the box scores. We don't have that kind of time. Different day, different show. Maybe I would sit here and count through the box score. But it can't be that many times that the White Sox have scored a bunch of runs. So given Hudson's ability to check power, which is shown a little bit here, you get Lubob at just a 6.76, Eloy Jimenez at 5.13, and then everybody else who, not the best group of home run hitters to begin with, everybody else below halfway to the magic number, including Paul DeJong, who leads the team with 14 long balls at 4.54. So it doesn't really lead me to White Sox bats, even if they're low owned for the matchup, which I think they'll pick up too much ownership for their mediocrity. Doesn't really lead me in that direction, and it might actually be a little bit trappy where people are just saying, terrible pitcher on the other side. They're super cheap. Let me make them my value stack of the day. I don't know if I see it. This confirmed version of the White Sox lineup has a 228, 281, 369 average slash line with an average 141 ISO, an average 83 WRC plus, 3 guys in the lineup just barely above water for run creation. I don't really see it. Maybe you pick off upside individually around like a Lubob, an LOA, maybe a short stack like the middle of the lineup. There's a lot of other spots I like better. If you're going to the Rockies against Thorpe, which is between the two teams, honestly, probably the better idea, given that Thorpe is more gettable for premium contact and fly balls at least. Similarly low strikeout, has had a bit of a walk issue so far in the show, but never throughout his career. So maybe you take some shares of Brenton Doyle for 41, 3,000. He's effectively cheap. 6 home runs, 18 stolen bases. 85 WRC plus is not great. The slash line is all right. He's a counting stat asset and an interesting spot if you're stacking this lineup. 12 home runs, 4 stolen bases, and a good effective slash line for Ezekiel Tovar this year. 14 homers for Ryan McMahon, a solid lefty bat with a little bit of power upside, of 199 ISO for him, 196 for Tovar. Both of those players above average for run creation this season. Both of these guys are absolute priorities if you're going to Rockies bats. You want to have both of them. You probably also want to have Michael Talia, 10.88, the only guy above the magic number in the home run model, but you've got each of these guys closing in on it. You're seeing more power upside on this side of the board. Talia's got 8 home runs, but he's sub-Mendoza, 240 on base, over 125 plate appearances. He's not good, but he's a good power bat. 13.9% barrels, 47.2% hard hits. He also strikes out 36% of the time and doesn't draw nearly enough walks to support anything that he's doing, but there is power there. Brendan Rodgers hitting cleanup, 31-26. He's been effective, 279, 313, 399. That said, 14 points below average for run creation really tells you the full story. 44.7% hard hits is good. The average is good. The on base is all right, but he's only delivered 4 homers, 1 steal. Has been a mediocre fantasy asset. He's cheap at second base, though. If you're stacking this team, it's easy enough to include him from the top of the lineup. Nolan Jones for 43-27, decidedly underpriced. 2 homers, 3 steals, and 145 is nowhere close to his output from last year. He was terrific last year. Really struggling to get it going so far this season after a long absence. 194, 303, 306, but major upside from the left side of the plate. I am not skipping Nolan Jones in stacks of Rockies. He's a priority bat to me in this stack. Stallings has been very good, over 137, 286, 368, 454. One of the better bats on this team so far this season. That said, he's like a middling type catcher, but he's playable, especially on DK if you're stacking Rockies. 36 for Stallings included in your Rocky stack makes sense to me. Jake Cave, Sam Hilliard, a couple lefties down the bottom of the lineup. Just kind of in this lineup today because they're left-handed. Hilliard does have a little bit of power upside. Hit 3 home runs in 78 plate appearances last year. Just 2 with 5 steals. Sub Mendoza in 200 the year before. But some power through the minors. Jake Cave, a mix and match part. Again, if you're going to the White Sox, these 2 guys are your priorities. But with reduced home run upside against Hudson's one good trait of limiting home run power. If I'm including Lubob and Eloy Jimenez, I'm probably going to include either Paul DeJong or Tommy Pham and just make it a 3-man. I think I prefer Pham, given the stripping away of power upside from Paul DeJong that is likely to happen. Give me the guy who's more inclined toward getting on base, correlated scoring from the top spot in the lineup. So Tommy Pham's probably priority number 3. 42-29, effectively priced, 4 home runs, 4 steals. Got a little bit of individual upside, but playing more like a correlated scoring piece this year. Andrew Benintendi, I know he had a good game the other day after I said he sucks. Let's see him do it again. He sucks. 199, 245, 308, 55 WRC plus. Prove me wrong, Andrew. I wouldn't include him. If I'm building a bunch of White Sox stacks, he's hitting second at a cheap price. So you're obviously including him, but he's nobody's priority. Andrew Vaughn for 35-28, 9 home runs this season, a 141 ISO and 86 WRC plus, very mediocre at first base. DeJong, again, 14 home runs is appealing, but that's all he does against a pitcher who's decent at limiting home runs. Nicky Lopez, Corey Lee, Lennon Sosa from the bottom of the lineup. You're not getting much quality out of those guys. Maybe Corey Lee for some mix and match shares at catcher if you're stacking a bunch of White Sox up, but I really don't like the spot. I don't like them as a stack. I don't like them even really as individuals. So this game for me goes Drew Thorpe pretty far above It's risky. He's on very shaky flooring, but he is on a floor or two above the rest of the options from this game. It's probably Rockies bats immediately after him, followed then by White Sox bats, but they're several floors down. They're like, you walk into the house, you go down the steps to get to the White Sox bats. You go up one floor to get to the Rockies bats. Probably go up to the third floor to get to Drew Thorpe, and to get to the White Sox bats, you got to go down into like a sub basement. Oops. Would anybody have noticed if I just skipped the Astros and Mets game? Probably. We've got lineups in at least for a lot of these games now. 4:37. We're doing okay. Is that the Astros and the Mets that I just grabbed? I think it was the Astros. Yep. So a couple of playable, effective kind of pitchers for this pitching slate. These guys qualify as they're in the same. Well, Ronel Blanco's not. Ronel Blanco's 3 on the board, but Quintana's in the group of same guys. Given the price difference, given some effectiveness recently from Quintana, I still don't like it. I was trying to get my way to actually being able to endorse that play a little bit, but it's really only price-based, and there's a lot of guys in that same range in better matchups. Quintana's fairly low strikeout on his own, 17.2% with a 7.6% swinging, 24.1% CSW, a 4.58 ERA with a 4.52 xFIP, just pitching like who he is. So it would need to be a shorter slate probably for that to actually be an effectively low price. I think he just kind of falls into the mix of same guys. Playable, but not a priority, and not a priority by a pretty long shot. On the other side, Blanco does project out strongly. I mean, I continue to not really think that he's as good as he's been, and some of the numbers back it up. Stuff Plus, for one, has him 5 points below average across the full arsenal. He's got a 2.34 ERA, which is dazzling, but a 4.12 xFIP. He's walked 10.2%. You're not going to sustain this for much longer if you're continuing to put 10+% of hitters on base via the free pass. 13.3% swinging strikes is great. 29.4% CSW. He's been a good strike thrower. 3% home runs is fine on weak contact, low exit velo, high trajectory, a lot of barrels. I continue to think he's going to implode at some point and you're going to want to have the opposing bats that day. So I can get behind a little bit of the Mets. I mean, you can see all the power that's shining through in the home run model here. 3 guys above the magic number. Lindor, Alonso, and Mark Vientos all above the magic number for power. And then both of JD Martinez and Francisco Alvarez not far behind. Either of these guys could easily have reached 10. If you move JD Martinez up into the leadoff spot and he picked up a quarter of a plate appearance or whatever the model would give him, it would probably crack 10. Brendan Nimmo against a righty with all his pop from the left side. 7.77. Hit that slot machine number. So, I mean, it's a nice little run of power there. The Mets have been kind of rolling. They've got Grimace on their side. Obviously, things are looking up. So I think it is a playable Met stack that probably won't be crazy popular. Might be a reasonable enough angle into the slate. They're sitting at a 4.05 implied total. Same thing on the other side, 4.03 for the Astros. So neither of these teams is completely flat dead on this slate. There's a few totals in the highish threes. There's a couple lower than that. But neither one of them is absolutely mashing for quality. If you gave this another minute 8.5, get them both into the mid-4s, there's really no difference if you just gave it another half run between these two outside of the 5s. There's really, outside of the 5s and this game, if that had another half run on it, they'd be right in line with all these other spots. So I can believe in the Mets a little bit. You gotta, as they say. And I can certainly believe in the Astros' ability to succeed against Jose Quintana. No issues with Jordan Alvarez going lefty-lefty, especially against a lefty like this. Love the righties in this lineup. Jose Altuve, Alex Bregman, who's continued to come on a little bit. Altuve's having an interesting year. Just a 159 ISO, but he's got his 12 home runs, his 13 steals. The power and the speed are right where they're supposed to be. The on-base, 303, 350, 462 slash line, creating runs 32% better than average. The ISO is just down a little. 233 2 years ago, 211 last year. But everything else is like right in line. Like last year, I mean, we're ahead of the pace from last year. 410 plate appearances last year. Actually, so not ahead of the pace. He's already made 351 compared to only 410 last year. All right, so on pace for about this. Just weird that the ISO is down a little. But Altuve continues to be spectacular at second base. For the money, 5,300 is honestly cheap against this pitcher on DraftKings. 3,800 totally playable on FanDuel. 44.32 continues to be very inexpensive for Alex Bregman. Not striking out, drawing fewer walks this year, but still an okay walk rate. Not mashing the ball, but hasn't really mashed the ball in terms of premium contact upside for the last few seasons. He's kind of in line with what those numbers have been. He's gotten his way back up to 253, 315, 407, a 153 ISO. He's 6% better than average for run creation. He's got 9 home runs, so maybe we finish in like the 20 territory. Is that going to be all that far off of last season when we had no issues playing Alex Bregman at higher prices? This is closing in. That is, within expectation. Maybe he loses 2 to 5 home runs when it's all said and done. The on-base is way down. The slug is closing in. The ISO is not all that far off. The run creation is down, but that's partly based on the on-base being so far down. But we're really not all that far off of last year's Alex Bregman, and he's definitely not priced like that. It's closer to where he was priced on FanDuel. DraftKings giving you still a nice discount at 44. Jordan just totally worth paying $58.39 for. He's got 16 home runs and 227 ISO and 333. The numbers are down slightly if you really wanted to quibble with it, but they're still terrific. 13% barrels is down 5 points from last year, but still terrific. 45.5% hard hits is down 7 points from the year before, but still terrific. Jainer Diaz for $41.29, a very effective catcher bat. 7 home runs, dead on league average for run creation. Okay triple slash, good average, but a mediocre on base, or a bad on base percentage, let's be honest. But an interesting bat to get in the cleanup spot, considering the frequency of contact with a 13.8% strikeout rate and a 4% walk rate, and the quality of contact, 48.4% hard hits. Hits the ball very hard for cheap prices from the cleanup spot with a bunch of guys ahead of him that get on base. I like Jainer Diaz here. Jake Myers, mix and match piece, having a decent year, 13 points above average for run creation, 7 homers, 7 steals. Jeremy Pena, 39.29, effectively priced for a guy giving you 283, 18, 380. He cooled after a good start. He's back to just being like all right, but he's a okay run creator. He's right at league average for run creation, 5 homers, 10 steals, a little bit of counting stat upside. So an effectively playable shortstop, not your highest end shortstop on the slate by any means, but playable in Astros stacks. Mauricio Dubon, 3,000. First base, I don't love it, but 3,000 is just another outfielder on DraftKings is fine. He's a lot better at 2,700 with quadruple position eligibility on FanDuel, slashing 295, 319, 415, creating runs 7 points above average. McCormick not having the year we expected, but a lot of time for him to round back into form and be the guy that he's been over the last couple seasons. Last year, breakout, 22 homers, 19 steals, a 133 WRC+, a 216 ISO. That guy's not dead. He's just not found his footing for the season. 29-26 for Joey Loperfido, who over 61 plate appearances has been pretty good. 28 points better than average for run creation, a 367 on base. Just keep on doing that, rookie. He's totally playable at 29-26. Very cheap option. Lefty bat. Not sure if we care about lefty-lefty with Loperfido. Let's see. Anything we have is going to be exceedingly small sample, but in 10 plate appearances against lefties, he is at 222, 300, 222. Totally meaningless sample size. He's got 2 singles. 2 for 10. He's in the lineup. He's cheap. You can play him. If you're going to the Mets, again, we took a quick look at it just based on the power, but go man by man. Francisco Lindor still not fully priced back to where he was. 13 homers, 13 steals, a 196 ISO, 17% better than average for run creation. Everything about Francisco Lindor is totally fine. It's right in line with where he's been. With just some random output has some of the numbers down slightly, but there's no reason to believe that he should be underpriced like he is. Absolutely fine with going to him. He's above the magic number for home runs. Nimmo has 12 on the season, a 191 ISO, 133 WRC+, still getting on at a 360 clip. Still a good correlated scoring spot. Player with a little bit of upside for power. We slipped a little bit in batting average, but tons and tons of upside from Nimmo for what is honestly a very fair 46.32 cross sites price wise. Martinez, 44, 3,000, 9 home runs and 219 plate appearances, mashing the ball with a 17.5% barrel rate when he makes contact, 503 slug, 215 ISO, 147 WRC+. It's been tremendous. Should probably be priced at 5,000 or above on DraftKings. Should probably be priced at 34 or above on FanDuel. Pete Alonso below 5,000 on DK is a bargain any day of the week. 3,100 on FanDuel, also a bargain. He's got a 224 ISO. His creator runs 27% better than average, 16 home runs. The premium contact is down slightly in terms of barrels. Hard hits are exactly where they were last year. He's still Pete Alonso. I have no issues going to him. He's got a 14.03 in today's home run model. Francisco Alvarez, 37.29. For all the power upside that he possesses, is very, very cheap, hitting in the heart of the Mets lineup on a day where they are showing power upside. He's also over his 107 plate appearances, slashing 313, 383, 521, which is dramatically better than he was for average and on base and everything last year. Very small sample still, but if there's any kind of improvement, that becomes an immediately even more interesting hitter from already being an interesting hitter. Remember, last year he had 25 home runs and 423 plate appearances. It's just that he slashed 209, 284, 437 around that. The ISO was great. The power was great. The run creation was below average because of the low average, the low on base. If he's improved in those departments, even if this isn't real, but call it, 240. If he's Pete Alonso's on base and average, that's still a major, major step forward for that player. And he would be wildly inexpensive at catcher. Tyrone Taylor, playable at 27-25, counting stat output, but has been pretty mediocre, over 158 this year. Vientos, major upside, 10.45, definitely not priced high enough. 3,600 is stupid cheap. 29 on FanDuel is cheap, but this is just dumb. Right? This is a discount. This is idiotic. What other synonyms can I come up with for dumb? Just such a bad price. Love that spot. 10.45 in the home run model. He's got 9 in 134 plate appearances. A 273 ISO. A 298, 358, 570 slash line, 164 WRC plus. Been absolutely tremendous and is supposed to be this kind of a hitter. This is not like outlier crazy performance. Maybe for average it is a little bit, but 9 home runs and 134 plate appearances. Maybe it's 1 or 2 ahead of an expected pace, but this is who this guy is supposed to be. So tremendous option at 3,600 at third base on DK. Highly, highly playable at either corner spot for 29 on FanDuel. Jeff McNeil, Harrison Bader. Bader's playable. Decent counting stat output, having a nice year. 113 WRC plus, 6 homers, 11 steals. McNeil, a lot less playable. Can put the ball in play, can deliver on random slates, but not much of a driver of the baseball, let's say. And when he's not dinking and dunking his way to a good batting average or a good on base, he's pretty worthless. Again, can put the ball in play and find success. Can he have a 3-hit day, score 3 runs, and correlate a little bit? Absolutely. But he's an afterthought in this lineup in stacks. Low priority hitter. I'm going to go Mets bats up top. Mets bats, Ronald Blanco, Astros bats, and then Jose Quintana really trailing by a ways as the last piece of the puzzle here. Totally fine with skipping Quintana. If you build 150 lineups, you probably should have some Ronald Blanco in there, considering he's the 3rd most highly projected pitcher on a very thin pitching slate. Pirates, Braves. Charlie Morton looks pretty good. We have the Pirates yet? We do. How about that? Hit the like button, hit the subscribe. I'm sorry I'm not interacting quite as much with chat today, but I'm just trying to get through all these games. It is 4:50 now, and we've still got a long ways to go. Let me say hi real quick. Let's see what good questions are in chat. Lone Wolf going to leverage the Houston stack, especially the lefty smashers, maybe 4-4 or 5-3. No issues with that. Mets still free on FanDuel is crazy. Yeah, I kind of like the looks of the Mets there. I might get to him, and honestly, I've targeted Blanco a few times, just looking for that blow-up spot, and I'm probably going to end up doing it again today. Might burn me again. He's been effective. I just don't fully believe. Lone Wolf looking at the Chaconi Quintana double spend down. Some balls, buddy. That is certainly taking him out and dropping him on the table. Jake Swales likes the Quintana and Ray pitching combo. That might be even worse. Both of Ciccone and Ray can absolutely succeed. We're going to look at those guys in a minute. I don't want to drag your plays down. because either one of those guys is good enough to succeed in those spots. I just have low faith in both of those pitchers. But let's talk Charlie Morton first 9,500, 8,800 against a middle-of-the-road Pittsburgh team. 4.20 ERA with a 4.01 xFIP, 24.1% strikeouts, a too high 10.5% walk rate with a 1.30 whip, but doesn't really get burnt by power. 8.8 degree average launch helps that a lot, despite a 9.1% barrel, despite 39.4% hard hits. Charlie is good enough at keeping the ball in the yard that most of the time he doesn't really get beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 home runs on the entire season. No games of more than 1 home run allowed. Mostly pitches 5 and change. Sometimes you get the 6th. He's pitched beyond the 6th just twice. Completed the 7th twice. Last time out, 5 2/3 against the Yanks. Gave up 4, struck out 4, walked 5, gave up 5, earned on 5 hits, including a homer. Was a lot better against the Rays in the game before that. Comparable opponent. 8 strikeouts, 2 walks, 1 earned run on 3 hits over 6. That's a dynamite start. That's probably what we're looking at today. 5 innings against the Nationals was bumpy. 4 earned runs. Also had that 8 earned run game against the Nationals over 5 2/3 a few starts before that on May 27th. Handful of 7 and 8 strikeout games in here. I'd say 6, 7 is probably in play. 8 is probably asking a lot. But there are plenty of strikeouts in this confirmed version of the Pirates lineup. 23.6% so far this year, 22.8% last year. They're drawing fewer walks than they did with the same group of hitters last year, so maybe there's a little bit of upside for them to draw walks. But again, Morton's good enough to punch his way out of trouble. 11.9% swinging strike rate this year. The stuff plus mark isn't great, 7 points below average or 6.5, but he is an effective veteran pitcher. He's lost a little bit of edge, but definitely playable on this slate. 8,800 is a pretty nice price on FanDuel. 95 just puts him in the mix at the top of the board on DraftKings. He's lowest or second lowest man. Obviously, Logan Webb just comes down a little bit on the opponent. On talent, Logan Webb is probably, it's either one of the Logans on talent on this slate, but Webb gets a little diminished by his opponent, and obviously Charlie has an easier path to success against the Pirates. But these two guys, I think, are a little offset from those two guys, or those three guys, rather. Martin Perez, I just don't think you play against the Braves when the Braves are at the second highest total on the entire slate at 5.26 implied runs and showing some pretty solid power upside. Perez has a 4.71 ERA with a 4.42 xFIP, a 1.55 whip, just an 18% strikeout rate over 57 1/3. Gives up a ton of premium contact, a ton of home run upside. 30 points below average for stuff plus across the full arsenal. 7.8% swinging, 27% CSW. Pitching in Atlanta against the Braves. Some rain in the area to throw another wrinkle into the equation. I just don't think you go to Martin Perez for 59, and I definitely don't think you go to him for 68 on FanDuel. He is below the line for the same pitchers. If you weren't here earlier, this block of pitchers between the orange lines, including the guys on the orange lines, are all essentially the same tonight, as is like that group of pitchers and this group of pitchers with one another up there. And then these are the guys that are basically out of consideration for me. Braves bats, major asset against Martin Perez. Jared Kelenic, 5.77 in the home run model. Ozzie Albies, 6.77. And then two guys well above the magic number in Marcell Ozuna and Matt Olson. Ozuna's got 21 home runs, a tremendous triple slash, a 269 ISO. He's created runs 65% better than average to keep this team alive this year. Matty Olson, 12 home runs, a diminished 193 ISO, a slightly diminished contact profile. Hasn't been the Matt Olson of last year or even the year before so far this season, but there is a ton of elite lefty premium contact, and I'm not worried about Matt Olson and a lefty-lefty against Martin Perez. Kelenic lefty is maybe a little bit more concerning. 278, 320, 453, getting a lot of opportunities in the leadoff spot, and the fact that they've got faith in him in the leadoff spot in this matchup is a very good sign. What's he done lefty-lefty, though, let's say? Oh, he's actually been effective. 293, 286, 390. So he's getting on base less. He hits for a much lower ISO, 0.098 ISO this season against lefties versus a 193 on the other side, and an 85 WRC plus lefty-lefty versus a 122 against righties. So there is a diminishment, but his slash line is all right in terms of the batting average. It's 42 plate appearances versus 186. Pretty small sample. If we look for the full career, which has been a very up and down roller coaster of a career, definitely takes a more appreciable dip lefty-lefty. 203, 259, 322 with a 119 ISO and a 64 WRC plus versus an also mediocre 225, 303, 415 with a 190 ISO. The ISO is a lot better the other way and a 101 WRC plus. Strikes out right around 30% of the time against both hands. Not the best day for Jared Kelenic at the top, but it probably renders him a little bit under-owned, and he's very cheap, and this is not a world-beating lefty that he's going to be facing. So he's all right. Albies for 55-36, a very strong second baseman over the last few seasons, having a bit of a rough year. 6 home runs, 5 steals, 251, 309, 397. Ozzie is a hell of a lot better than this. I expect him to improve over his second half, and those numbers normalize. Happy to have him in my lineup today. Austin Riley for 52-35, still underpriced. A little bit cheap on DraftKings, a little bit cheap on FanDuel. Cheaper on DK slightly relative to the cap. 252, 324, 417. Again, it's like Albies. It has not been a great season, but he's still making tremendous contact. Hard hits are actually up. Barrels are down, but only by a point. Striking out a little bit less, walking the same. 8 home runs and a 165 ISO, but this is a guy who hit 30-plus each of the last 2 years, 37 last year, 38 the year before. I have a lot of faith in Austin Riley's upside. Another player, just happy to have him in a lineup against this lefty. Sean Murphy, tremendous right-handed catcher with a lot of power upside. He's been rough over 83 plate appearances, missed a ton of time so far this year. Last year hit 21 home runs in 438 created runs, 29% better than average with a 227 ISO. It's a tremendous right-handed power bat, and he only costs $3,100. That's just dumb. Just go like that. $4,900 apiece for the 5-man core of the Atlanta Braves. That's playable. It's expensive, but it's playable, and Murph helps you bring it down. Maybe you skip, I don't know, start with Ozuna and go down through Duvall, and now you're at $4,400 apiece, and you get another right-handed slugger against a mediocre lefty. Duvall's been bad, 163, 239, 287, a 50 WRC plus. He's been 50 points worse than average for run creation. But he still barrels the ball. He's got 6 home runs and 197 plate appearances. Still hits it with authority against bad lefties. Orlando Arcia has been pretty bad this season. Was pretty good last season. You can play him. He's cheap. But it's been a little bit hard to have faith in. That said, more hard hits so far this year than last year, which is just odd given the dramatically reduced output. Luke Williams, mix and match part at the dead min on either site. If you're taking Pirates bats against Charlie Morton, it's probably a limiting spot, but they'll be low owned. There are some frisky hitters in this lineup, certainly. McCutchen, 11 home runs on the season. Brian Reynolds has 13. O'Neal Cruz has 11. They have okay ISOs. Nobody over 200 in terms of ISO, but all of these numbers are all right. These two guys especially. Cruz, despite the power at 239, 290 on the front end of the triple slash, is a little bit rough. That's what leads to just a 97 WRC plus. Has lost a couple of extra base hits in there somewhere, and fairly low ISO for a guy with 11 home runs and this kind of contact. But given the contact, the level of contact that he makes, if we get any kind of increased regularity of contact, this guy immediately becomes a superstar. 3,300 is cheap for him on FanDuel. 4,900 is certainly playable and fairly cheap for him on DraftKings. All three of these guys being below 5,000 is playable and targetable if you're looking at Pirates bats as a contrarian angle. I would want probably all three of those guys in my lineup if I'm stacking any kind of Pirates. Then you could take or leave Rowdy Tellez. Rowdy's got a lot of power upside historically, but has been really rough for it this year. Just 5.6% barrels, only 3 home runs and 205 plate appearances. 24 points below average for run creation, and most concerningly, just a .090 ISO. That's pretty bad. 42-31 for Nick Gonzalez, who's had an effective 165 plate appearances. He's created a run 6% better than average. He's hit 5 home runs, 281, 311, 438. A mix and match part with a decent contact profile in the small sample, but had a light one last year. How many plate appearances was that last year? Just 128 last year. He was decidedly worse. But, some signs of improvement maybe in a similarly small sample. Edward Olivares, a little bit of premium contact power upside, 174 plate appearances, 5 home runs, just a 123 ISO. Last year hit 12 home runs in 385 opportunities, had a 189 ISO, a little bit more believable for power output from last year. So, cheap. Just another outfielder, but he's cheap. Ke'Bryan Hayes, 3,500, 2,600, plays a hell of a third base, but just not hitting all that well. Disappointing to see him at this level over 237 plate appearances because I was expecting him to take a step forward this year based on some of the hard hits and the frequency of contact, but it just hasn't arrived. He missed some time earlier in the season. Maybe he lands in the second half a little bit better. Right now, just kind of bouncing along. He's playable at third base, but he's not a priority. Jack Suwinski, I probably, even with the struggles, I probably prefer Jack between like the bottom 4 hitters here. 3,200 is cheap. 2,600 is cheap for a guy who just last year hit 26 home runs and stole 13 bases in 534 plate appearances. He's never going to be a tremendous hitter in terms of his average, but he had a much better on base last year, and obviously was delivering a lot more frequency of power, 230 ISO compared to a 126 ISO this year. But I do still think that's lurking in there somewhere. And then Just Money Grandal is also in this lineup and hit 2 home runs in the same game, which might be his one claim to fame this year. Braves bats, Charlie Morton. Pirates are just dart throws. Cubs and the Brewers. Doesn't look like we have these lineups. Lone Wolf mentions Noelvi Marte at third base in Cincinnati stacks. I do think that's a very interesting bat, but it was one that's not available. We're not at that game just yet, but still not available on FanDuel unless they added him, which is weird. He's been back for a couple of days now. 3,600 is a dynamite price for him on DraftKings. But we're here. We got to talk through this one first. Colin Ray, who is getting a little bit of buzz in the chat. He is in that bucket of same guys. All right, price-wise, upside-wise, projection-wise, he's right in that mix. All these guys, again, are basically the same. You can play the price and ownership and pick your favorites. It's really, there's not one that's going to stand out much better than anybody else when all those guys are priced within the same range and projected within the same range. Both guys on each side of this game in very similar situations at almost identical projections. So Colin Ray, a 15.6% strikeout rate. It's already kind of a big negative. 3.46% home runs allowed on 90 miles an hour of Exavila. That's a big strike against. 9.5% barrels on a 14.1 degree average launch is a pretty big strike against. Just 85.24 by stuff plus 15 points below average. And this is what I was talking about with last year. We were aggressively targeting Colin Ray's home run issues last year. Similar, he's improved in the hard hit department a little bit, almost an identical Exavilo number, and more home runs on a lower barrel rate, lower average launch. So there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of bumps potentially around Colin Ray. That's why we get 3 guys above the magic number in the Cubs lineup and another at least one closing in on it with a couple believable options for additional upside in Ian Happ and Dansby Swanson for home runs as well. In no way is Colin Ray safe, but he is easily believably in that group of same guys. So if you like him, I'm not going to talk you out of him. Has spiked some interesting DFS days from time to time in his brief career. Last time out, 5 earned runs over 5 1/3. Did not strike anybody out. Walked 2, gave up 2 home runs against the Padres. The game before that, though, kind of effective. 6 strikeouts, just 1 walk. Gave up a homer, 2 earned runs on 4 hits to a pretty good Reds team that's somewhat comparable. 7 innings of quality against the Blue Jays. Only struck out 4, but walked 0, gave up just a solo homer and 3 hits in 7 innings. Pretty good start there. So you can get that kind of upside day out of Colin Ray. It's just a relatively tough Cubs opponent. I know their record is no good, but there's a lot of decent hitters in here. There's a lot of premium contact, a lot of barrels, a lot of very hard hits. Number of guys who draw double-digit or close enough walk rates with pretty good on-base percentages. It seems like a rough matchup for Colin Ray to find that level of success today. Tyon on the other side had a monster in his last start. 7 innings, 10 strikeouts, 1 earned run against the Mets, 6 hits allowed. The 1 earned run came on a solo shot. He also gave up a home run the game before that, but just 2 earned runs over 6 innings on 7 hits. He only struck out 3 and walked 2, and that was against the Cards, which probably should have found more strikeouts along the way. 6 innings against the Rays, clean. 5 strikeouts, 1 walk, no runs on 4 hits. Pretty good start there. 5 earned over on 10 hits over 5 innings against the lousy White Sox, and I'm pretty sure I said we could play him that day. Got beat up that day, but that was his worst start of the season, believe it or not. Outside of the 5-run game against the White Sox, Jameson Taillon has not given up more than 3 earned runs in any of his 12 starts this season. 2.90 ERA, but a 4.28 xFIP. I believe this number more, but that's effectively playable-ish. It's just a rough opponent. The Brewers are pretty good. The Brewers are scoring a lot of runs. They've got some decent power bats. They've got some good on-base skills. So I just don't really have a lot of faith in the spot. At 82, 83, though, you could find success from Taillon. He's in that mix of sames. And it wouldn't knock me out of my chair if he beat the Brewers tonight. Does he beat them clean over 7 innings with 8 to 10 strikeouts? Probably not. Does he beat him over 5 or 6 innings with 3-4 runs against? Hopefully 3. And 4 to 6 strikeouts? That's a lot more in play. So I think he's fairly priced for that. There's a minor amount of upside on his projection, but more often than not, we're probably coming in around the 23, 25 point range, 11 to 13 points on DraftKings. I would probably rather have, well, I don't know. I can make a good argument for either of these teams. Who does Vegas like better? Vegas likes the Brewers better. That's what I was going to say anyway. So we'll go that route, I guess. I don't know. Call it a tie. Cubbies coming in about a half run lower on the Vegas board, but showing more power against a pitcher who gives up more power. On that, for DFS purposes, I think I can endorse the Cubs a little bit. It's, call it a tie between the two teams. We'll do the Brewers first because they're leading on the Vegas board by half a run. Bryce Turang is pretty good at second base, 4,900, 3,300. He's stolen 27 bags. More importantly, he's getting on at a 354 clip. His created runs 18% better than average. Very, very strong slash line. He's just a low strikeout, get on base, correlated scoring piece, and he's dynamite at doing that with the upside of some stolen bases. So really like Turang if you're stacking Brewers against Taillon. Seems like a realistic starting point. William Contreras, Christian Yelich, both priority bats if you're stacking Brewers. I think everybody knows you don't skip Christian Yelich that often, and William Contreras has been right there with him this season. 125 WRC plus for the catcher, 152 for the outfielder. Yelich has 7 homers and 16 stolen bases. Contreras has 9 homers and 5 steals. That's the other good thing about this team. In addition to everybody hitting for at least like medium level power, everybody steals bases on this team. They are an aggressive team on the base paths. So it gives you a little bit of padding for your fantasy stats. It helps create runs if they're doing it successfully. So I like the upside with the Brewers for that as well. Willy Adames still cheap at 4,800, 3,400. He's never going to hit for average. 238 average is fully within expectations after a good start. 331 on base. I care about that a lot more. And then he's given us power. He's given us steals. 13 homers, 10 steals. A pretty good premium contact profile. He's limited his strikeouts to just 21% while pushing walks up by an additional point up to 12.2% so far this year. 186 ISO is one of the better marks on the team. He's created runs 15% better than average. I don't think he's a superstar shortstop, but he's a very effective shortstop play for a discount from those superstar shortstops. I like the option. Jake Bauers at 36.28, an effective enough outfielder, not any kind of model of consistency, but does have power, 7 home runs, 7 steals, and 192, a solid 11.1% barrel, 43.5% hard hits, a positive run creator. Rhys Hoskins, also a positive run creator, a lot of power there, 11 homers, 10.66 to lead the team in the home run model today. 13.4% barrel rate, also leads the team this year. Sal Frelick, Joey Ortiz, Jackson Chourio, a trio of pretty good options late in the lineup for a little bit of like mid-range power from at least 2 of those guys, Ortiz and Chourio, and then speed for all 3 of those guys. The ability to get on base for Frelick and Frelick and Ortiz, and even though he hasn't shown it, most likely for Jackson Chourio. He's a dynamite player. He's exciting. Does a lot of interesting things on the field. Just needs to kind of pull it all together. He's hit 8 homers, 8 stolen bases. Hit an inside the Parker the other day, which was exciting. But he's been very limited in his rookie season. Frelick has been better at keeping the ball in play, getting on base. You can see he's 1 point below average for run creation. The most interesting bat down there is Ortiz. Third base only sucks at 4,000 on DraftKings. You can get him at second base for 2,800 on FanDuel, which I absolutely love if I'm going to this team. 275, 380, 455. Creating runs 38% better than average. Right there with like Jackson Merrill as one of the better and less heralded rookies in the National League this year. So they're stackable pretty much 1 through 9. If this is the lineup that you get, it is a 1 through 9 stackable team. On the other side, the Cubbies play kind of similarly in that you can pick off some decent power bats along the way. All of these guys also steal bases, or at least most of them have effective stolen base totals. Pretty similar for power output, pretty similar for on-base skills and run creation. This is a good matchup of teams at different levels of success so far this year. Nico has 14 stolen bases now, 336 on base. I told you that stolen base total would go up if you continue getting on base at that clip. Interesting enough option at second base for a cheap price in the leadoff spot against Colin Ray. No issues with it. Table setter type option, but 3 home runs on the season. He's got a little bit of ability to drive the ball, not really in terms of believable premium contact numbers, but he's put the ball in the seats a couple of times, and he's very low strikeout, so there's a lot of balls in play. Michael Busch for just 31-26. Creating runs 26% better than average, a 182 ISO, 9 home runs. A lot of that came in like the first, call it 120, 150 plate appearances, but still maintaining across the extended sample some pretty good quality. Second base eligible on FanDuel makes him super interesting for 2,600. First and third base also there. Just first base on DraftKings, a little bit more challenging, but not a positional blocker to anybody on his team, just relative to the other first basemen that are available elsewhere, a little bit more limited. But a solid 9.62 in the home run model, 11.9% barrels. Bellinger for 57-32 has 9 home runs, 4 steals, a 113 WRC+. Very effective at getting on base. Moderate power, up and down kind of power output, but a 10.77 leads the team today in the home run model against the weak righty. Seiya Suzuki, a tremendous hitter of the baseball, 11% barrels, 51% hard hits, 9 homers in 246 plate appearances, 193 ISO, creating runs 25% better than average. Has also thrown 7 stolen bases into the mix. Ian Happ has 10 homers and 7 steals. Chris Morel has 15 homers and 7 steals. 180 and a 183 ISO. Mix and match output this year in terms of regularity and quality. Both of those guys may be slightly underperforming in the frequency of quality department, but they're both very, very cheap for those perceived struggles, and neither is all that far off the mark. So I like getting Ian Happ for 39-31. I like getting Chris Morel for 47-31 when they're both showing decent upside. Dansby for 37-27, also cheap. He's scuffling at just 217, 290, 365, and 87 WRC+. He's got 8 home runs and 5 stolen bases. Been okay in the premium contact department, 9.7% barrels and 44.3% hard hits. In a vacuum, those are very, very good contact numbers. So Dansby's another player. Yeah, I think he is off the mark, but I don't know how far. I think he's believable for a second half surge. Crow Armstrong, good for stolen bases, not so good for average or on base, limits him in terms of his fantasy output. Miguel Amaya, just a mix and match catcher. For me, it is Cubs and Brewers bats, any of them and all of them, just call it a tie across the board for both of those teams. The Brewers are at the higher Vegas total, and they are certainly the better of these two teams. But on an individual like DFS basis and quality basis and matchup basis, the Cubbies are right there in this game. So call that a tie at the top, and then call it a tie between the two pitchers. You can make your decision based on price and fit and based on ownership and exposure on whatever site you're playing on. Neither guy overly likely to win the day. Both guys likely to come in around these median projections that you can see with a handful of points of upside for either one of them at a fair to effective price. So they're both on the board, but neither is a priority. It's going to be the exact same pitching conversation in this game. Alec Marsh for 79-85. Tristan McKenzie for 75-78. In this one, that's probably the better option, just a little bit on price. Exact same 21.8% strikeout rate over almost identical innings pitch samples. McKenzie's made one more start than Marsh has. McKenzie's given up way more power. These are pretty similar pitchers by and large, but better xFIP for Marsh by a pretty wide margin. Yeah, maybe I'll swing that back the other way. I don't like either of the pitchers. Even with price factored in, I won't say that McKenzie's a better option than Marsh. I'll just say that they're both decidedly mediocre and fairly at the bottom of the same board right next to each other. And as I've said all along, I just prefer bats in this game. It's like when all these guys up here and the guy immediately below them are all the same at a variety of the same kind of prices, why go to the game that has the highest run total out of that mix of games? Both of these teams at 4.80. To start the day, this game was here. That was at a 10. The lines were slightly different, but both of these teams were hovering in that neighborhood. So I'm just thinking bats, but if you want to roll the dice with the pitchers, it's really thin. It's thinner, again, just you saw it on the board just a second ago. Compared to the other guys priced like them, they have thinner opportunities. They have lower end opportunities than everybody else does. They are loosely playable, but they stretch the limits of playability. It's amazing how similar they are, though, outside of the power output from McKenzie and the doubled walk rate from McKenzie. So, again, across those tiebreakers, that does favor Alec Marsh a little bit. But Marsh is probably in the worst matchup between the two. I think I'd rather target the Royals just slightly. It's very, very close. But I think I'd rather take on the Royals than the Guardians. But that it forces the hand of just like, I don't really need either of these pitchers on a deep slate. If I'm looking at the Guardians line, let's see if we have it. We do. We have both of these. Beautiful. This is another game, by the way, with rain concerns in the area, but seemed like it was going to play. All right, so the Guardians give you a phenomenal table setter in Stephen Kwan from the top of the board, 5,600, 3,900. The individual contributions are limited to some degree, but when you're getting on 43% of the time at the top of a lineup that has been churning runs and pretty productive, at least through the top half, that's a pretty killer spot. He's also provided 7 home runs this season, 4 stolen bases. The 7 home runs are weird. That's odd output for him. And it's not like he's driving the ball any more aggressively than he has in years past. Stolen bases just come with his, A, he's got speed, and B, he gets on base. So that's actually kind of a low stolen base total for 240 plate appearances of that kind of quality. But I would expect that it goes up as long as he continues to hit leadoff, which he will, and continues to get on base, which he should. So love the option, 56.39. You are paying a premium for Stephen Kwan. So you have to take that into consideration. You're definitely paying an on-base tax there and a correlated scoring tax, and it exists on both sites. So it makes him a little bit more challenging to put into a lineup alongside Jose Ramirez and Josh Naylor, who are 2 absolute priorities in this lineup. And then by comparison to the other available outfielders like David Fry, let's say, for cheaper, Tyler Freeman for cheaper, it just does become an option where it's like, all right, I like Stephen Kwan. I think he's going to score 3 runs and get 3 hits today, so I want to work him in there. But then I can't get to pitcher X for a higher price. I got to use mediocre pitcher Y. I got to go down to Slate Ciccone or whoever, Colin Ray, when I could get somebody slightly better if I just forgo Stephen Kwan and use David Fry. It's a little bit less of a conversation between those two on DraftKings. There's $1,000 difference between those 2 hitters on FanDuel, and Fry still has catcher and first base eligibility. Oh, Fry actually has his catcher eligibility still on DK, which is nice. But there's only a $200 difference between them on DraftKings. There's a monster difference between Stephen Kwan and Tyler Freeman in the 7 spot. But you're obviously talking about very different kind of plays once you get down that far removed in the lineup. And there's a big quality difference and output difference between the two. So I love Kwan. He's just pricey. Schneemann, 29.26, immediately offsets some of those price concerns if you're just including him in the lineup. 4 positions on FanDuel, third base eligible on DraftKings, or just another outfielder over there. 2 home runs, a stolen base, 361 on base, creating runs 43% better than average with a 231 ISO over a small sample of 61 plate appearances. Has been pretty effective and fits in for a cheap price at a bunch of different spots. So highly, highly usable, making very good contact so far in the tiny sample. Ramirez is a superstar for 63, 41, 21 home runs, 15 steals for him, 261 ISO, 143 WRC+. Josh Naylor right next to him at 20 home runs, 259 ISO, 126 WRC+. Doesn't steal bases like Ramirez does, but actually barrels the ball a little bit more, has more frequency of hard hits. And you get Naylor for 51 compared to 63, 35 compared to 41 on FanDuel. If you're deciding between the two, there's an appreciable discount for similar ceiling on Josh Naylor at different positions. I want both of them if I'm stacking Guardians. David Fry for 54, again, with catcher eligibility on DraftKings becomes interesting. If he was outfield only, that would be a high price, and he'd be more of just another outfielder. $2,900 is a very good price for him on FanDuel. Makes him really compelling over there. 8 home runs, 4 steals, 305, 416, 515 with a 210 ISO, 165 WRC+, over 202. It's been very good. Cooled off a little bit after a ridiculous start, but has maintained quality across that slash line, which keeps him very interesting. Andres Jimenez, 47,300, effectively priced, reasonable contributor. He's 10 points below average for run creation, but 5 steals, 5 homers, 14 steals. Needs to improve the slash line and get back to some regularity of quality, but a mix and match piece at worst at second base. It's just with the second base eligibility on Schneemann, you kind of want to go to that second spot in the lineup for cheaper rather than the guy hitting 6. Freeman for 38.28 has not delivered the frequency of contact that is allegedly in his bat. Does have 6 homers and 8 steals, a mix and match part in the outfield. Brian Rocchio plays a hell of a shortstop, but we don't get credit for that for DFS, so he's just a forgettable piece at the bottom of the lineup for DFS. And then Austin Hedges has not been a good catcher bat in quite a while. Like the Royals, and again, I might just go back to the game stack in this one. Like the power upside that they're showing. 2 guys above the magic number, Vinny just below it. A couple of guys in the 6s here. It's a playable team with a good matching run total, 4.80 run total. Michael Garcia, 46 with second and third base eligibility on DK. Just a third baseman on FanDuel. That sucks. I'd love to have him at second base. 3,200 over on FanDuel, 46, very fairly priced. 5 home runs, 19 steals, just 232, 286, 343, 25% worse than average for run creation. Should be hitting down here, but is not. You can absolutely play him for correlated scoring, counting stat upside, whatever you need. But the quality performances have been a little bit few and far between. Bobby Witt, superstar, 66-42. Love the idea of getting him and these 2 guys into a lineup. If I'm game stacking this game, it does get pricey, but it's doable. 12 home runs, 21 steals for Witt, 223 ISO creating runs, 44% better than average. Vinny, as I continue to harp on, if he continues doing what he does with the bat and with the limited strikeouts and the frequency of contact, all of that is going to surge. Just continue believing, continue putting him into your lineups. You get the ability to play him and Sal and, him, Vinny and Sal together with no concerns there and over here. So happy to do that. Where you run into trouble is if you're game stacking, getting both of them and Josh Naylor on the FanDuel slate becomes problematic because Naylor doesn't have the outfield eligibility that he had through last year that was just absolutely dynamite for including him in stacks. So it sucks that you do have to decide. For me, yesterday I left Sal out. That's probably the way I would go again. That said, they are the same price at 31 on FanDuel. It's easier decision, but you don't have to make it on DraftKings between these 2. You do have to make it between these 2 on DraftKings, or if you played Sal at first, obviously those 2. Sal's got 12 home runs, 179 ISO, 124 WRC plus, having a tremendous season. There's been some dips and some cooling off periods, but by and large, he's been very, very effective with the bat this year. Hunter Renfroe, 7 home runs, pretty limited. Slash line, 84 WRC plus. Just another outfielder. He's cheap, mix and match type level of talent. MJ continues to make very good contact, continues to struggle with everything else, with actually delivering quality from that contact. But 35, 27 from the left side of the plate against a righty who gives up this kind of premium contact, there's good reason to believe that MJ could succeed today for a very effective price at 27.35. Absolutely, if I'm stacking Royals, I want MJ Melendez in my lineups today. Nick Lofton, Freddie Furman, Kyle Isbell from the bottom. Furman's having another quality season as a backup catcher bat, 294, 344, 34, 115 WRC plus in a limited sample of plate appearances. Isbell has been worse, but provides odd counting stats here and there. And then Lofton's just decidedly mediocre, 76 WRC plus for both of those guys. Boy. Oh, that's right. Vegas is a tie. Call it a tie. I'm going to say I slightly prefer the Guardians bats between the 2 teams, but both teams easily on the board and a good spot, it looks like, for bats in this one. And then both pitchers, I'll probably slightly favor Marsh, even though I prefer the matchup the other way, just because McKenzie's been worse this year. But they've both been really, really similar, and I think they're both fairly in, once again, this group of pitchers and at the bottom of it. So bear that in mind. This is more a spot for offense. Cincinnati, Street Lewis. Ever tell you guys that story? It's not really much of a story as a brief anecdote, but one of the dumbest people I've ever met in my entire life was this girl who will remain nameless, largely because I don't remember her name. But we were in, I think it was Spanish class, oddly, one day. And, for some reason, she had to read aloud. I guess she was reading a Spanish paragraph aloud, and then it got to the word St. Louis in that Spanish paragraph. And she decided to read it as Street Louis, which I've never forgotten, and I consistently use when I refer to this city. I just love it. It's just one of the dumber things I've ever heard in my life. I understand how you could be, you're thinking in Spanish, reading in Spanish, and you just hit that. It's just, that compounded on the fact of just years and years of knowing this person and just being one of the dumbest people ever. Street Lewis. Love it. Andre Palante has been effective at limiting launch angle barrels home runs. He's not good, but he's been really good at that. In relief last year, over 68 innings, he had a negative 11.5 degree average launch, negative 3.3 over 108 innings in 10 starts and some hybrid work out of the bullpen the year before. So, I mean, this is Fromber level of keeping the ball down. It's really all he does. You can see 16% strikeouts 2 years ago, 14.2% with a lot of walks out of the bullpen last year. 1.56 whip is way too high, 4.76 ERA, but a 4.01 xFIP. This year, 17.8% strikeouts with a 10.3% walk, 5.23 ERA, but a 4.08 xFIP. The one thing that he's doing is clipping the wings of the Reds' power upside. It doesn't really hurt them in the fantasy projections, run scoring, run creation department. They're still checking in at a 4.09, call it 4.10. The Cards on the other side are oddly drawing a higher total. If you made that 9, this would probably be more realistically, four and change, which I think is probably, again, where the Reds belong with a little bit more run scoring upside. I think the projections kind of get them to that level a little bit more. It's a very gettable spot. It's just, what do they do home run wise? We're going to need a lot of doubles. We're going to need a lot of base hits, turn the lineup over, consistency. And that's not necessarily what these Reds do all that well. So I can see the downside. I can also see the upside based on some of the players in this lineup. As mentioned, you don't get Noelvi Marte unless something changed on FanDuel, but at 3,600, that's a dynamite option on the DraftKings slate. He's made 5 plate appearances after his 80-game suspension for PEDs, but he's a tremendous prospect, a lot of success in the minor leagues. Somebody definitely to consider hitting 5th in this lineup if you're stacking up Reds. Jonathan India in the top spot, gets on base, pretty good correlated scoring option. That's all he really needs to be from that spot. 377 on base is killer. 119 WRC plus this season. 5 home runs, 8 steals. He's an average player who can get on base. So continue giving him that leadoff role like they weren't for most of the season. 37, 3,000 for a correlated scoring piece. If you're stacking them up, he makes a ton of sense at second base. 64-44 for Ellie, just a 4.95, reflecting the negative launch angles for Andre Palante. But if anybody can homer against this guy, Ellie's at least on that list. 14 long balls on the season, 38 stolen bases, slashing 255, 346, 470, 215 ISO, creating runs 26% better than average. Strikeouts are down 3 points, walks are up 3 points. That's a good trade-off. Very solid barrels and premium contact numbers. He's been stellar over 346 plate appearances. I know he's got his flaws, but he's also got as high a ceiling as basically anybody in the sport most days. 47 in the outfielder at first base for Spencer Steer, not bad. Like him even better with the second base eligibility on top of that for 33 on FanDuel. 241, 328, 417. Effective creator of runs, 10 homers, 12 steals. Going up against a mediocre pitcher outside of the lack of home run upside. Put the ball in play a handful of times, use his speed to help create runs. I like Spencer Steer here. Nick Martini from the left side, 36-24, 4 home runs. I think 2 of them came in the same game early in the season. It's been pretty mediocre. You're getting a lefty bat, pretty limited premium contact this year, but pretty decent premium contact in a small sample last year. 79 plate appearances last year. He had 6 home runs and had all this quality contact. But he's made lower levels of contact in an extended sample this year and been pretty bad slash-wise. Santiago Espinal, just a mix and match piece in the infield on both sides. Third base is atrocious for him on DraftKings. If I play him anywhere, it's at second base on FanDuel, but he's pretty weak. 49 WRC plus, 4 homers, 6 steals. Will Benson, I think you guys know by now, I love. Excellent premium contact option. 8 home runs, 9 steals, 185 ISO. Everything is in spite of the 194, 285. And remember, as we remembered yesterday, we remembered the premium contact, the counting stat results from last year with the 11 homers, 19 steals, but I had forgotten how good of a hitter he was in his 329 plate appearances last year. So we're just down this season, but I still really believe in the talent, and he's very cheap, hitting 7th, easy enough to get to. One of the priorities in this lineup, for me still at least, Stuart Fairchild, Luke Maile, playable parts, but also skippable parts at the bottom of the lineup. Neither one has been overly productive this season. Either one does have the ability to drive the ball a little bit. If you're going to the Cards, you're doing it against Frankie Montas. I like that. Montas is a highly targetable pitcher. 4.48 ERA with a similar 4.51 xFIP, just 18.4% strikeouts, 9.4% walks, a 1.36 whip. It's more just that we've kind of broken our Cardinals habit, and I'm using the royal we because I mean me. I've been able to get away from the Cards a lot more this season than I have in years past. But with this matchup in town, with them drawing a fairly decent total at 4.49 compared to some of the other options on the board, and with literally everybody but Wilson Contreras below 3,000 on the FanDuel slate, the cards are interesting today, given those prices. Everybody in the lineup is below 5,000, Contreras included on DraftKings. They're crushingly cheap for a team going up against Frankie Montas, who has just not been good in quite a while. He's not completely terrible, but he's not good. There's a reason he costs 65 on DraftKings. Could you play Frankie Montas here at that price? I think so. Last time out, 6 innings, 2 earned runs, a homer, 5 hits, 4 strikeouts against the Red Sox. Game before that, just 3 earned runs on 4 hits over 5 to the Brewers. Struck out 5, walked 3. 4 earned runs over just an inning and a third to the Cubs. I don't know what happened there. 2 strikeouts, 3 walks, 5 hits. Had a 7-inning game at Coors Field. That was his best start of the season. I'm gonna speculate here before I look at the full game log. 7 innings at Coors, 1 hitter, no runs, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts. Frankie Montas could break that game off against these Cardinals. He's not off the board. On the FanDuel slate, I thought the computer was about to die. It froze for a second there. I was like, no. On the FanDuel slate, he lands, kind of at a higher price in the middle of this range of mid-level guys who are all the same. The fact that he's so much cheaper than most of these guys and all of the believable/best guys in that group, outside of maybe Slate Ciccone, the fact that he's so cheap on DraftKings makes him worth the conversation. It makes him worth clicking into your lineup and seeing what you can build with him. Do I expect Frankie Montas to succeed? No. Can he succeed? Yes. If you're going to cards bats, which you should absolutely, if you build a little position of Frankie Montas, you should most definitely be hedging with some Cardinal stacks. Between the two, I prefer the Cardinals bats. I just think price-wise, Frankie Montas lands playably on the DraftKings slate. A lot less so on FanDuel, especially with low faith in getting to a quality start. But if you're going to the cards, again, which you should do if you build that position, and which you can do in a vacuum, even with no Frankie Montas in your portfolio, the cards are effectively cheap enough against a very gettable pitcher that it makes sense to probably have some, even though we've tried to break that habit this year. 37-29 for Donovan, who hits the ball effectively enough, has 8 home runs, a 270, 336, 420, creating runs 18% better than average. Lefty bat off the top. Not a bad option for a fair price. Wilson Contreras at this price on DK is a fairly high priority catcher in terms of just how all catchers stack up against one another. If you're looking to one-off the position, you can definitely do a lot worse than grabbing him for that price. 6 home runs in 145 plate appearances, 386 on base, creating runs 54% better than average, a 240 ISO, tremendous contact profile over the last 3 seasons at least. Contreras is a very good catcher option today. 3,200 on FanDuel, totally playable in stacks. Highest priced player on that team, though, you can maybe skip him. It would be a mistake probably if you're building, like, let's say you build 10 Cardinal stacks. You want Contreras in half of those. But in the other half, it's not a total mistake to skip him in favor of going, like, you could do something weird like, all right, I'm going Burleson, Goldie, both in the lineup, but not using Burleson in the outfield so I can grab 3 straight outfielders on the other side. You could do that even if Burleson didn't have the first base eligibility, obviously. You could do something like Goldie Carpenter if you wanted. Carpenter's been completely awful this season, but they're the same position. You could alternate there. But more often than not, I want Contreras in that util spot along with my Goldschmidt share. Goldie's up to 10 home runs. It's been a bad season. 132 ISO, 92 WRC plus. We're just kind of lingering with the memory of him being good. But at least his premium contact numbers are all right. 8.7% barrels and 47.6% hard hits is a hell of a lot better than his infield mate. 3.4% barrels, 28.2% hard hits for Nolan Arenado. That's really concerning. He's got 7 home runs compared to Goldie's 10. Also compared to the other Nolan's 16. He's definitely hitting for a better average than those two guys, getting on base at similarly low levels, creating runs better than these two. But what we care about for DFS, I think, is more limited for Arenado maybe than it is for Goldie or Nolan Gorman. Every one of those 3 guys is cheap. You could absolutely 3-man that across your infield for very, very cheap on either side. First, second, and third base, you could do worse. Even with the struggles, even with the sub-Mendoza output from Gorman, there is upside there. I don't want to sell it too hard because they've been very limited this season. They've been bad, and we've been trying to avoid it as best as possible. Against Frankie Montas, for these prices, there's appeal. I didn't mean to fully skip Burleson, but 39.29, pretty effectively priced for a guy slashing 285, 316, 470 with a 186 ISO and 12 home runs so far this season. It's a lot of output in 268 for Burleson, but he's been very good. He's been proving it. Last year, over 347, had just 8 home runs, 244, 300, 390, 146 ISO. That's why I say it's a lot of improvement and a lot of production in a short span for Alec Burleson, but he's been undeniably good this year. Carp is more of an afterthought, given the 94 plate appearances of just no real quality output, 2 home runs, .096 ISO. It's been pretty bad. Crawford, 2,100 is just cheap, but he's also been very bad this year. And then Michael Ciani, dead min in the outfield on DraftKings, 2,200 in the outfield on FanDuel, is a mix and match piece. Doesn't get on base enough to support the speed output, doesn't drive the ball enough to support the power output, but he's probably the best out of these 3 bottom options. So really the quality for me is 1 through 6 with the cards. I think they are a usable discount value stack today against Montas. Give me I hate to do it, but cards, bats, Reds, bats, neither pitcher. Either pitcher is a dart throw, again from the value range, 1 and better on DK, 2 at the bottom of the board. Palante's arguably better on the FanDuel slate at 64. I just don't know if we get that quality start. 5 1/3 last time, 3 1/3 the start before that. He's gotten through 6 innings once this year. Also a handful of appearances out of the pen, of course. 5 starts. So, pretty mediocre FanDuel option even for 64, but you are saving quite a bit of money there. If he limits the home runs, you're not looking at a lot of strikeouts, but like limit home runs, limit runs against. Get me 6, get me a quality start with some win equity. It's really thin. I don't know that he's even got like 10 plus on top of the median kind of ceiling. So you probably fall off the board compared to all these options. He's just very cheap. $538. We need to hit the velocitator a little bit. I'm sure the manual will tell me which is the velocitator and which is the deceleratrix. Mr. Burns, when Homer was his assistant while Smithers was away. Got scared of Homer, started driving himself. No? Let's see. Angels and the Tigers. I don't think we have either of these lineups in. Doesn't look like. Tigers. Kenta Maeda on the mound. 71-73. Falls into that group, but another guy with a lot of, faith issues on my end as far as actually wanting to play him out of that group of same guys. He's just in there on median projection and price. But it's been pretty weak for Maeda over 13 starts. 54 innings this year. That's not a lot of innings for 13 starts. 17.6% strikeout rate is pretty bad. A 6.0 ERA is terrible on the surface, but we don't care about ERA, but we peel the onion. 4.73 xFIP is also pretty bad. Limited swinging strikes, very limited CSW. Has gotten burnt for a lot of home runs given the barrels and the launch angle, even with a limited hard hit rate. This is an aggressively high, it's a fairly aggressively high exit velo number, but it's not awful. These two are non-tragic, but this is really bad, and that's really bad. So Maeda is really scuffling. There's enough home run upside in this lineup to believe that the Angels could ruin his day while not necessarily being like a premium go-to stack. And it's kind of similar going back the other way. Tigers against Zach Plesac. He's only made 2 starts and thrown 9 1/3 so far this year, but he's got an 8.68 ERA in those 2 opportunities. We'll look at last year, 21 1/3, so he didn't really pitch much in the show. Last year had a 7.59 ERA in that sample with a 13.3% strikeout rate. Last time we fully saw him was 24 starts and 131 2/3 in 2022. Had a 4.31 ERA, a 4.44 xFIP, and a 17.6% strikeout rate with all that premium contact and power allowed. I think Zach Plesac is believably out of range of the same guys. Maeda, again, just kind of in there, but I think he's one of the lower ceiling, more higher danger options from that group. So let's talk bats. We talked through the Tigers a lot yesterday with some hesitation about them being such a good stack and being actually deserving of popularity. And, it kind of worked out well for us from that conversation. So hopefully you guys avoided them yesterday. I do think there's definite upside against Plesac, but they'll probably draw that same kind of popularity as like a cheap option with a few talented guys in the lineup against a weak pitcher. I don't think Plesac has nearly the upside that the kid yesterday did, given his strikeout stuff yesterday that he had shown through the minors that we could believe in. So I think it plays better than it did yesterday, but it's still a very limited Tigers team. I could easily see them going out and just scoring 4 or 5 runs and not having a good DFS day. But Vierling's been good, 4,200, outfield and third base on both sides. He's hit 10 home runs. 287 on base is really weak for the leadoff spot. A 192 ISO is very good. Maybe we should slide him down the lineup and move, say, Mark Canha. Again, I don't want to harp on this too long, but Mark Canha, 343 on base this year, an entire career so far of getting on base very effectively. That's what Mark Canha does. He should be leading off for this team, not Matt Vierling. Matt Vierling makes a lot more sense hitting cleanup or hitting fifth. Just dumb. Maybe they'll do that. This is a projected lineup. 236, 283, 325 from Colt Keith. He's improved a little bit over the last month or so, but still looking at just a .089 ISO, 73 WRC+. I still believe in the talent, but he's been in the minors in the Dynasty League for about a month now. That shows what I think of his current year output. I just think he needs a little bit more development, a little bit more seasoning. Hopefully he's not Spencer Torkelson. Hopefully he's more Riley Green. Green's their best player, 4,900, 3,500, 15 home runs this year, 235 ISO, 140 WRC+. Tremendous slash line, 13.5% barrels, 47.3% hard hits. Guy just needs some help. Canha, again, effectively gets on base, has a little bit of right-handed power in that bat, 40.7% hard hits, but never really barrels the ball all that much. Is just pretty effectively low strikeout and good on base correlated scoring option from the veteran. But 104 WRC+, he's a decent option, just a weird spot in the lineup. Wenceel Perez, 3 home runs, 6 stolen bases, an okay triple slash, creating runs 2% better than average. Mix and match piece for a fair price. Gio Urshela, 29-24, overrated as a hitter, not all that appealing. Over 188 plate appearances. He's been pretty meh. Just puts the ball in play a lot. 15.4% barrels, 15.4% strikeouts, 4.8% walks. But you can see a limited 4.7% barrels, 28.2% hard hits, and has never really been an effective hitter. Justin Henry Malloy has believable power upside, 2 home runs in 66 plate appearances, hasn't really done much else in the show except for strike out at a 39.4% clip so far. Limited option. McKinstry and Jake Rogers, 2 more limited options at the bottom. Rogers, good for infrequent catcher power, but it's very, very infrequent, and he doesn't do anything else. McKinstry, sub Mendoza, over 138 plate appearances, no contributions from him other than 2 homers and 4 stolen bases. It's Riley Green, Matt Vierling, +1 kind of a stack. And my +1 would probably come from Canha, Perez, or Colt Keith. It's probably more played as a 3-man. If you're on FanDuel, you can obviously stretch that to 4. Just put in an additional one of the other 2 guys. If you wanted to stretch it to 5, those are your 5 on DraftKings. It's pretty straightforward. On the Angels side, if this is the lineup, I don't love Nolan Shanuel in the top spot. Another guy just miscast in the leadoff role right now. 8 home runs and 85 WRC+, not really hitting for consistent power. Not really doing much of anything at first base. Really tough fit at first base outside of just being cheap. Not a great option. Rooser and Hifo, no multi-position on DraftKings for 51. That kind of sucks. He's good enough to be valuable at third base, but that price is a little challenging just at third base. Triple position eligible, like him better at second base or shortstop on the FanDuel slate, 3,100, effectively priced over there. 5 homers, 20 steals, 312, 359, 433, a 125 WRC+. Sorry about that. Taylor Ward, Miguel Sano, Willie Calhoun, Logan O'Hoppe in the middle of the lineup. That's where this team gets some power out of. Less so with Willie Calhoun. He's more of a line drive, low strikeout, put the ball in play type specialist. But Taylor Ward has 14 home runs. Miguel Sano had 2 before he went out. He's missed most of the season. 80 plate appearances, just a 129 ISO, 40% strikeout rate. But tremendous premium contact in the small sample of batted ball events so far. And that's who he was, 2 years ago, 13.9% barrels, 52.8% hard hits in, I think, a small sample. Yeah, just 71 plate appearances. He was out of baseball, and he was out of baseball, kind of for a reason. But there is a lot of power in that bat if you catch him on the right day, and he's cheap. So he's in consideration against a pitcher who's had some home run issues this year. O'Hoppe, 4,000, 3,000, 10 home runs, a 185 ISO, pretty believable catcher power, 47.4% hard hits compared to 46.7 last year. Barrels are down a little bit, 10.3 down from 15.6. Was a little bit better last year for power upside, but could come surging back at any moment. And again, 10 homers in 258 plate appearances from a catcher is not bad output at all. 35.29 for Zach Neto. Another player you could make a good argument that Neto should be hitting higher up in the lineup as well. 10 homers, 11 steals, a 111 WRC plus, a very solid 185 ISO. He's been pretty good, and he's still pretty cheap at shortstop. It's just gets outpaced by a lot of much, much better shortstops across the full slate. Mickey Moniak's been pretty bad. Joe Adell has also been pretty bad, but at least had the 12 home runs and the 9 steals early to kind of cover up the struggles. Still 12.2% barrels, 43.9% hard hits over his 239, a 204 ISO, but we're getting ugly in the slash line in the WRC plus department. You're counting stat, homer hunting, and a little bit of stolen base upside if you're using Joe Adell, especially hitting ninth. There's just less appeal. Just stick him in the 5 spot and just roll with it. If you're going to play him, play him. Move him up where he gets more opportunities, and is in a better RBI spot. He's limited by the 9 spot. Tigers bats, Angels bats. They're pretty close. You could play that either way. Pick your poison. Whichever pitcher you want to target, whichever of these teams you like better, however you want to play that. They're both on the board for cheapo shares against bad pitching, but I do think they pick up a little bit of popularity by comparison to, let's say, I thought it was the next game. Let's say the Oakland A's, who I think are a little bit interesting given these power marks against Slate Ciccone. We'll get there. But Tigers bats, Angels bats, only a slight difference between. I wouldn't really consider either pitcher, but Maeda is the go-to between the two if you're doing it. Oh, that's right. The game with actually good pitching. One game on the slate has 2 good pitchers, and it's this one. And I think the world will be on both of these pitchers, which is a shame. Starting with Bailey Ober off the top. 4.50 ERA with a 3.91 xFIP, 25.2% strikeout rate on 13.1% swinging strikes. He's been totally solid this year. 9 innings of 2-run ball on 4 hits against the Athletics in his last start. Struck out 10, gave up 2 homers, but those were the only 2 earned runs. Struck out 8, walked 2, gave up a homer, but only that 1 earned run on 6 hits over 6 1/3 against the same Oakland team in Minnesota. Bumpy one against the Pirates. Gave up 4 earned on 7 hits, only went 4 2/3, struck out 5, walked 2. You don't want that start, obviously. You probably don't want the start against the Yankees where he only struck out 2, walked 4, gave up a homer and 3 earned runs, but only 3 earned runs on 3 hits over 5. You definitely don't want the game against the Royals where he gave up 6. He's had a couple rough spots. That's the thing with Ober. You do have to thread the needle between a couple blow-ups here and there. But more often than not, he fits the definition really well of like one of those pitchers where you can pretty much rely on 8 to 10 really good starts. You can pretty much rely on 8 to 10 rough ones. And when his starts get rough, they get into the 5-6 run territory with a couple home runs allowed. And then his season is decided by the chunk of 10 to 12 starts in the middle, as the old baseball adage goes. He very much fits that. And this year so far, the starts in the middle have been a little bit favoring the quality, the better upside Bailey Ober. It's where some of the strikeouts come from. It's a fairly low walk rate. It's a very good swinging strike rate. He's given up too much premium contact and too much power. He's a fly ball pitcher, so we can't be giving up 9.8% barrels. That's where the 4.24% hard home runs come from. You can see that Stuff Plus does not like the arsenal all that much, but he's effective enough with it, and he's facing a Mariners team that we have been targeting with way worse pitching all season long. 26.8% strikeout rate for this Mariners confirmed lineup, 23.1 for the same group of hitters last year. Call it 25, decidedly in the middle. So you're giving Bailey Ober, who has a 1-4 strikeout rate, the opportunity against a team that has a 1-4 strikeout rate. That adds up pretty easily in my mind, especially for just 8,800 on DraftKings. Easily the top bargain among the high-priced pitchers on this board. 9,800 I'm happy to pay for if I can figure out a way to afford it against this Mariners team. He makes sense to me as a usable piece. He could save a few bucks compared to his opponent on the other side. Logan Gilbert projects out higher, but not all that much higher. If I can save $700 by making that pivot, I'm happy to do it against the worst of these two teams, the team with a much higher strikeout rate. Logan Gilbert's just good. 2.71 ERA, a 3.39 xFIP under that, 24.6% strikeouts against just 5.2% walks, a sub 0.9 whip. Usually I say sub 1. We're sub 0.9. 0.89 whip. 14.2% swinging strikes at 29.5% CSW. Pretty good at limiting premium contact, limiting power against. He's an excellent pitcher. He's just facing a good team for run creation, a team that it can hit for a little bit of power. I don't love the matchup for Gilbert, but I can absolutely see him succeeding at least to the median levels with a little bit of win bonus, quality start bonus upside on both sides. And on the right day, he finds a few additional strikeouts against this team. This year, this group of Twins is at 18.2%, but the same hitters last year, 21.9%. Call it 20 and change, 1-5 against a 1-4 strikeout pitcher. I favor the pitcher a little bit there. I think he finds a couple bonus strikeouts more often than not. Between the two teams, I would much rather have the Twins, even facing the better pitcher. But they're at just a 3.37 total. Makes it a little difficult to believe today. 3.71 on the other side for the Mariners. I just really don't believe in that. And why am I going to a sub 4 run total, even if they are the better of the two options in this lineup, according to Vegas? And I don't know that I necessarily see that. Starting with the Twins, Willie Castro in the leadoff spot again. 4 positions for 3,000. Let's just give him a 5th position. Let him play first base one day so he gets the 5 like Oswaldo Cabrera on FanDuel. 2 positions, second base where you want him, and outfield where he's totally playable on DraftKings 4,600. It's good enough price. He is more than just another outfielder for 46 on DraftKings. So you can play him there. I prefer him at second base. Love the price on FanDuel. Been a very effective run creator this year, 36% better than average for run creation, hitting the ball pretty hard with a 184 ISO, delivering a lot of extra base hits, scoring a ton of runs, stolen 8 bases and hit 7 home runs. Really effective option for the money. Carlos Correa in the lineup after taking a bump the other day, which is good to see. 309, 380, 494, a 185 ISO, 8 home runs for him. Having a great year. 267 plate appearances. Creator runs 47% better than average. He's up to 53 on DraftKings. They finally figured something out over there. 33 on FanDuel. Now we're actually a little bit effectively cheaper on FanDuel against the cap than on DraftKings. They're yet to catch up to Trevor Larnach's quality, though. Solid lefty bat. 10.3% barrels, 44.4% hard hits with better premium contact each of the last 2 years. 7 home runs, 178 ISO, creating runs 9% better than average, slashing 255, 304, 433. Mid 4s at worst. He's probably $500 cheap over there. $300 cheap on FanDuel. Royce Lewis, they got right. 6,200, 4,400. Just crushes the baseball. 16.7% barrels in his 89 plate appearances. Limited sample of batted ball events. Does that necessarily cool off? I don't know. I don't know that it does. He's, just improving on these marks. It is a small sample, so maybe it does. But he's inarguably a tremendous power bat. 430 ISO in that tiny sample. 102% better than average for run creation so far. 10 homers in 89 plate appearances is absolutely absurd. Carlos Santana, 4,000, 2,900. They're yet to catch up to his quality this season as well. 12 homers. 333 on base is good. A 192 ISO is very effective for power. 122 WRC plus. He's been tremendous, and he's never struck out a lot, so he's putting the ball in play. Doesn't crush it like these guys do, but a very effective home run bat. 6.33 in the home run model. It's just Gilbert on the other side that limits these guys. Jose Miranda, 36-28, good line drive hitter, 295, 341, 495. Creating runs 35% better than average. A 200 ISO with 8 home runs in 229 plate appearances, and he only cost 36 at third base, 28 at third or first base on FanDuel. That's an easy bat to get to. Not necessarily today because they're at a low run total against a very good pitcher. But I mean, if we want to take that approach that I talk about sometimes of like when we do target good pitchers, with low-owned teams, it's best to do that with good teams. The Twins, at the very least, fit that bill. They're going to be low-owned. They are underpriced. It's just an angle in against Logan Gilbert. It's just Gilbert does not really fit the mold of like the type of good pitcher that I like to do that. I'd like to have at least a few more walks on deck. The idea of more power maybe, but like from a good pitcher. Something a little bit more meaty to target. So it doesn't quite fill that bill for me, which is why I'm a little bit, behind on, not behind, which is why I'm a little bit thinking that we go thinner on the Twins today. But among all of the low-owned teams, they're indisputably one of the best. Max Kepler for 44-27, 6 home runs, a 163 ISO. Limited season so far from Max, but 2% better than average for run creation. A lot of quality in that bat. I don't write off Max Kepler by any means. He's just cheap, totally playable in the outfield on both sides. Manny Margot, Christian Vasquez. Margot can contribute from time to time, but he's mostly here for defense. And Vasquez really hasn't been all that good. They've each hit 2 home runs. They've each stolen a couple bags, but they're way below average for run creation, and they're very limited options at the bottom of the lineup. If you go into the Mariners against Ober, they're, again, probably the more likely of the two teams. Ober has his blowout games. He's been more gettable for power this year. But the Mariners have been really bad. Overall, they've been scuffling this season. Average batting average of 219, average on-base percentage of 302, average slug of 365, average ISO 147. 4 guys in the lineup better than average for run creation. One of them is J.P. Crawford off the top. He's up to a 315 on base, but that still pales in comparison to the 380 that he had last year. Drawing some walks, doesn't really strike out too much, not hitting the ball all that hard. 7 home runs, 3 steals. It's been pretty mediocre at the top. Tough way to spend your shortstop share. Julio Rodriguez, 52, 3,000. Still cheap. 7 home runs, 16 steals. Just a .084 ISO, 252, 303, 335. Maybe we don't get the full bounce back from Julio this year. He improved a little bit from his really rough start, but it's still pretty limited after 346 now. We'll see what the next 300 look like, but he is starting further behind the curve than he did last year. Cal Raleigh, 45-29, has 14 home runs, but a very limiting triple slash, wildly inconsistent player. The only guy in the lineup, though, above the magic number for home run upside at 12. Mitch Garver's got a lot of premium contact, a lot of catcher power as well. Obviously, you can't go to both those guys on DraftKings. You can on FanDuel if you want it, but it's not the best fit in the world. 29-28. They're cheap. They do have power upside, but that's really all either of those hitters has. Neither one is consistent for average, on base, run creation, anything like that. They both strike out 30% plus. So they're more targets for Bailey Ober to me. There's a lot of strikeouts in this lineup for Ober. Dominic Canzone makes killer contact from the left side. He's also very, very cheap. 3,300, 2,500. He's hit 7 home runs in just 133 plate appearances at 210 ISO. Another guy who's inconsistent, who strikes out way too much, nearly 30% out of him so far this year. Last year, though, he was at just 17.6% in 182. He hit for less power, 6 home runs in that sample last year. But if we can get this back down toward even the low 20s, he becomes immediately more interesting given the quality of contact the last 2 seasons. Ty France is a mix-and-match first baseman who's creating runs 9% better than average, but doesn't do it on anything that's overly appealing DFS-wise. A little bit of premium contact, has been a better average and on-base hitter over the past few seasons. Now he's hitting for a little bit more power, which is a weird switch, but skippable. Jorge Polanco hasn't given us much at all this season, which is disappointing. I was looking for him to have a nice bounce back. 5 home runs, a 102 ISO is just lost at the plate this year. Mitch Haniger, similarly lost, just 6 home runs, a 115 ISO out of the former power bat. Either one of these guys is a total write-off down toward the bottom. At least with Mitch, you're getting barrels and hard hits, though. 48% barrels, 8.7% hard hits. If I had to decide between the two, that would be my tiebreak if it's not position or price. A little bit more belief in Mitch right now than in Jorge. Josh Rojas at the bottom, just a mix-and-match part. A little bit of counting stat upside. Creating runs 4% better than average. It's going to be Logan Gilbert followed by Bailey Ober. 2 pitchers all the way up at the top of the board. Believably, the top 2 options on the slate. Either way, I think you're taking a good option. I prefer, on matchup and price, I lean a little Ober. On talent, I lean a little Logan Gilbert. I don't think you're making a mistake either way, but the Twins are most certainly the tougher of the 2 opponents, where the Mariners have been a year-long target for us. So bear that in mind. Both these pitchers are going to be popular. If you're rostering bats against, you probably want to side with Vegas and take the Mariners against Ober with his potential to blow up and the home run upside. It's a little bit more thin for the Twins going up against a better Logan Gilbert. Still 1 game after this. 2 games to go. A's and the D-backs. I've referred to this one a few times. We've got the lineups. J.J. Bleday, the home run pick of the day. He's had a good year from the left side of the plate. We're also seeing power for guys like Brent Rooker, Miguel Andujar in that lineup. Believable downside for Slate Ciccone here. We used him once fairly recently. He can have okay days from time to time. He's not that far below average by Stuff Plus, especially compared to some of the other guys on this slate. But you can see the guy right across the lane here at a very similar kind of a number is also a decidedly mediocre pitcher. So that doesn't necessarily mean anything. 5.41% home runs on 10.7% barrels, 17.3 degrees average launch. Even without a lot of hard hits and exit velo, that's a very concerning combination of factors for power. That's where some of the home run upside that we're seeing with the A's comes from. 4 guys at the top of the lineup, well above the magic number for home run power. One of those guys has 11 home runs. That's JJ at the top. He's got a 208 ISO. Rooker and Langoliers both have 14 home runs apiece, 245 ISO and a 226 ISO. Stuck in between, you've got Miguel Andujar, who has just 2 in his 122 plate appearances, a 103 ISO, but a lot of home runs in his past, in his track record, the ability to hit the ball really hard, and he's been doing really well over this limited sample so far. 328, 352, 431. His created runs 28% better than average for this team. He's an interesting bat. He's got first base eligibility for just 28, which makes it easier to play all 3 of those guys off the top. On DraftKings, you just got to decide, all right, that's my outfield for cheap prices, which isn't ideal. But when you can add Soderstrom at first and then Shea Langoliers at catcher and make it a full 5-man with some power upside from those guys too, it gets a little interesting. I do think we see a couple of home runs out of the A's today. It's just another team where what does it ultimately add up to? What does my correlated scoring look like if I do get those home runs? Did anybody get on base ahead of those home runs? What comes with it? That's where the A's stack could fall down a little bit. Armando Alvarez in the lineup, as you just saw, had to add him. He's a righty hitter, 2,400, 2,500. He's made 9 plate appearances. Been effective over that stretch. We'll see how he does going forward. Just a mix and match piece at second base. You've also got Zach Geloff, who we saw a lot of quality out of last year. He's got 8 home runs and 8 stolen bases, which is good in 244 plate appearances. Just been pretty limited in every other department of hitting so far. But between the two, probably still prefer Geloff even at a slightly higher price. Langoliers, again, a lot of catcher power, but that's about it from Shea Langoliers. But 14 home runs, a monster contact profile. You just need him to make contact. That's the key factor. 204 ISO out of Tyler Soderstrom with 6 home runs over 129 plate appearances. He's really delivering on his upside. Very solid lefty bat, making tremendous contact so far this year, and only cost $2,700. I would say that they probably haven't caught up to his quality over there at that price. 26 on FanDuel arguably also is not quite caught up to the quality. That's closer. This is really cheap. Tyler Soderstrom is really interesting at 2,700. I flat out like that spot. It's appealing, but less appealing on FanDuel. If he had his catcher eligibility on DraftKings, it would also be interesting, but you got Langoliers, so it makes sense to just have him at first. But buying this kind of contact, again, it's a small sample of batted ball events, but this is who he's supposed to be. So buying that level of contact, this level of quality and output and power and run creation for just that price, there's appeal there. Daz Cameron, just another outfielder, 2 home runs, but Sub Mendoza's 238 on base is pretty concerning over 63. Very limited sample from a kid who once upon a time is supposed to have a little bit of talent. And then Max Schumann at the bottom of the lineup, 2,300 shortstop on DraftKings, kind of an afterthought. 3 positions at least for 24 on FanDuel. 90 WRC plus, 3 homers, 4 steals over 202. Pretty limited option. The quality's really 1 through 5. It's very straightforward and obvious. I don't know how popular they get, especially if people are going to Ciccone as a value play. And again, for 69 and especially for 62 on that DraftKings slate, I do think he's in that mix. He is the top guy in that group of same guys. So just on projection alone, leaving price out of it, he aligns with all of these guys. And if you can get him cheaper than all of those guys against one of the worst teams out of all of these opponents, there's demonstrable clear upside for Ciccone. He's just got to avoid the home run ball. Didn't give up a homer in each of his last 2 starts, but gave up 2 homers to the Angels and 7 runs on 10 hits to the Angels with 4 strikeouts in 3 starts ago. Lasted just 3 innings there. Home run in each and every game from that one going back in time all the way to May 3rd. A 2 home run game in that mix, a 3 home run game in that mix, 1, 2, 3 games in that mix of 6 earned runs allowed, and then the 7 earned run game. It's dicey. It's thin. He did have a 8 strikeout game early in the season. He had a 6 strikeout game again 2 starts ago against Washington. That was a good one. 6 innings, 3 hit ball, no runs, no walks, 6 strikeouts. If you get that day, you're off and running at 6,200. It's just a little challenging. The A's can certainly feed a little bit of bonus strikeout upside. Maybe he gets to 1-5. He hasn't really walked many hitters, but a 5.74 ERA, a 4.50 xFIP, and again, all that power upside. Tough. Sears on the other side, 15.4% strikeouts, 5.04 ERA, a 5.24 xFIP, also giving up a decent amount of premium contact. It's resulted in fewer home runs, but it's been problematic this season for JP Sears overall. Exactly 1 strikeout in each of his last 3 games, like I mentioned at the top of the show. Hasn't gotten beyond the 5th inning. Gave up 8 earned runs in an inning and a third to the Twins in his last start. D-backs are not quite the Twins, but they're a good team. Has had a few good ones mixed in. 6 innings against Seattle, 8 strikeouts, 2 walks, 2 runs on 3 hits. 8 strikeouts, that's a 7-run game. That's kind of 7 strikeouts. There you go. Against the Yankees all the way back on April 2nd. No runs on 3 hits. That was a good one. A lot of mix of like meh kind of starts. He had an 8 strikeout game against Seattle, 2 runs. I think I just mentioned that one. Yeah, it's hard to find some selling points for JP Sears this year. We're more kind of just remembering the guy that had a 21.9%, 4.54 ERA, 5.10 xFIP last year. Was a little bit more effective in spots, but also gave up a ton of premium contact, ton of power. I think you just probably forgo Sears even for 56. I was trying to find a reason, but it's really not there. Diamondbacks bats are in play. You got 2 guys above the magic number for home run upside. One of them is Ketel Marte. The other is Christian Walker. You also get Lourdes Gurriel at 7.65. No Jock Peterson against the lefty, but maybe you see him pinch hit and pick off a home run that way. I would honestly just roll Jock out at this point. He's having a really good year, and this is not an intimidating lefty, but I'm not managing the team. Blaze Alexander is very interesting in the second spot, 3,200 at second or third on DraftKings, 3 positions for 26 on FanDuel. Getting on base at a pretty good 335 clip, creating runs above average, has 3 homers, 3 steals. Effective 165 plate appearances. That is exactly who he was supposed to be. Very good spot in the lineup for a cheap price that helps average down, the straight line stack. Lourdes Gurriel for just 4,000, 3,000 on FanDuel. Has 10 home runs. Creating runs at league average, a 147 ISO. 264, 298 is not the greatest front end of a triple slash, but he's got a 40.2% hard hit rate. He's a low strikeout, put the ball in play type. I don't see why he's that cheap. I could see being under 5, but it should be more in like the 45 to 48 territory, I think. So you're getting a nice discount on DK. Not as big a discount, but discounted on FanDuel. Maybe by 100 or 2. Marte has 17 home runs. So does Christian Walker. Marte is the better overall hitter in terms of average and on base. 236 ISO compared to a 216. 138 WRC plus compared to a 121. Either way, those 2 guys bookending the top 4 spots are your 2 priority bats. And then you go to these 2, or you can go further down lineup and a little bit more faith-based plays than these guys. Randall Grichuk has had a pretty good 133 plate appearances, though, if you wanted to bolt him into that equation. Just 2 home runs, but a 150 ISO is okay. This is a light ISO, but it's okay. Means he's got some doubles in there. He's not just a slap hitter. 2 home runs and 133 could be a little bit higher, but Grichuk's never been, a monster power bat. 122 WRC plus is nice. It's effective, good on base, making pretty good contact. 46.6% hard hits is excellent. Doesn't really strike out, puts the ball in play. Eugenio Suarez has been rough over 303. He's only got 6 home runs, a 120 ISO, 68 WRC plus. Pretty skippable. Corbin Carroll, out of all these misprices and weird prices and everything going on DraftKings, how the hell did they still have Corbin Carroll at 5,000? He's hitting 212. If you care about average, and a lot of these guys seem to be lowered because of bad batting averages, how in the hell is Corbin Carroll still a $5,000 player on that DraftKings slate? It doesn't make any sense. 3,200 on FanDuel is also probably a little high for who he is this year. 0.098 ISO, a 78 WRC plus, 2 homers, 14 steals, 212, 302, 310, 4.2% barrels, and 35.4% hard hits. Where's the good? Where's the justification for making him so expensive right now outside of just last year? And I get that I do that the other way a lot of the time for established players. Yeah, but over the last 2 seasons, he's been really good, and we have some faith in the upside, and he'll get back to the norms and everything. More track record with most of those guys that I say that about. More reason to believe there were things that we could at least point to for a lot of those guys. Corbin Carroll has been struggling across the board. Lefty is also not kind to Corbin Carroll. for the month of June. He did close way up to 250, 351, 357. He was 6 points better than average for run creation. A 107 ISO was actually worse than his May ISO. Didn't really strike out, drew some walks this month. He's been a little bit better in terms of getting on base and providing some correlated scoring, but that does not justify that price. Over his last 2 weeks, his last 14 games, 208, 309, 313. 1 triple, 3 doubles, 2 ribbies, 3 steals, 2 runs scored, or 10 runs scored, excuse me. There's some, like I said, there's some good, okay correlated scoring going on now. But from down here, for one, that's a terrible spot in the lineup to provide that. And he's just expensive for that kind of quality. Really limiting. Araldo Perdomo, 33-23, a playable part. Getting on base at a decent clip over 72. Got on base at a decent clip last year. Just kind of a wraparound option. Limited power, a little bit of speed. Tucker Barnhart, entirely skippable in the last spot. Yeah, given the 5.15 implied total on the Arizona side, I guess you got to give it to the Diamondbacks bats. Diamondbacks bats, but I really like the sneakiness and the cheap pricing on the A's today. I think that's a really interesting spot. And then for me, it's really neither pitcher. But if I'm going to one of these two guys, it is Slade Ciccone against the A's at a good price. Really don't feel like tangling with the Diamondbacks with JP Sears given the current form. Last game up, 6-12. Damn, lost 10 minutes there. I thought we were closer to 6. Let me get through this. Just taking a quick glance at the chat. Monty, I don't think he had it with him yesterday. Although if you actually read a transcript of that, I think he actually won, considering the other guy didn't actually say anything substantive or truthful. But yeah, that was not an ideal performance out of the candidate last night. Anywho, Dodgers, Giants. Dodgers going up against Logan Webb, one of the best pitchers on the slate. Very, very limiting for power upside. You can see the impact he's having on the Dodgers home run numbers at just 3.28 for the full lineup. Only Shohei Ohtani above even halfway to the magic number. Teoscar falls just short of halfway at 4.79. Ohtani at 6.79. He's got 25 home runs and 16 steals. So, I mean, if anybody's going to get to Logan Webb, Shohei Ohtani's on that list. Webb gives up plenty of barrels, plenty of hard hits, plenty of exit velo, but he does it on a 2.7 degree average launch. And he's terrific at limiting runs, limiting damage. He's not super high strikeout, 21% strikeout rate, but he gives you a ton of innings by and large. 105 and a third in 17 starts this year. He's got a 3.16 ERA, a 3.09 xFIP, just 7.7% swinging strikes, 27.9% CSW, and a 21% strikeout rate. Kind of limiting factors around that. Last year he was at 22.8% strikeouts, the year before 20.7. He's never been a big strikeout pitcher, but he's like the mold for like control command, keep runs off the board kind of pitching. Drew Thorpe wants to become Logan Webb, basically. So love the upside, just a really rough opponent. That's what's limiting his projection a little bit. That's what's got him down compared to the other top options. That's kind of obvious, right? But a great pitching environment. He's got the Dodgers below a 4-run total and significantly below. So really like the opportunity. And if Logan Webb goes under-owned by comparison to those other top options at a cheaper price just because he's facing the Dodgers and a limited version of the Dodgers at that, I don't totally hate it. I think that could be quality sneak from the end of the night. Landon Knack on the other side, a lot less so, but effectively average stuff. A sub-1 whip, 2.10 ERA, but a 4.76 xFIP is probably the real number. Just 17.6% strikeouts. Hasn't been bad for home runs, but maybe a little lucky given the 18.3 degree average launch, the 92 miles an hour of exit velo, and the 47% hard hits. All of that is bad. None of that adds up well. It's just the Giants, the ballpark, are feeding him a little bit of upside for maybe limiting home runs. Falls into that bucket of same guys, and kind of up near the top of it for the money. He's playable. He doesn't have an overly tough opponent. There are some strikeouts in this lineup, 21.2% this year, 24.6% for these hitters last year. Maybe a little bit of sneaky upside for Landon Knack as well, but it's relatively low faith. And again, just a solid citizen in that block of same pitchers. If I'm taking bats, that's where it gets interesting. Giants at a slightly higher total. It's probably best to avoid bats on both sides. I have a hard time saying I would take the Giants over the Dodgers just given this quality, but these guys are still super expensive for kind of a bad spot between the pitcher and the ballpark. So maybe it's best to avoid the Dodgers today. They still rate out just fine. If you're looking at Giants, Brett Weasley from the top, 36-26, has 2 home runs, a stolen base, a okay 327 on base. He's creating runs at a 17% better than average clip over 104, hitting for a good average. He's an okay player, 10.4% barrels is all right. League average is kind of a strikeout option. It's just there are better shortstop options. Outfield and second base eligible for 26 on FanDuel is more playable there. Elio Ramos has been really interesting. 16.7% barrels, 53.3% hard hits, 10 home runs at 218 ISO, 148 WRC plus. Guy mashes. He's cheap enough. Totally playable against Landon Knack. Probably the top priority bat in this lineup, although Lamont Wade is back, 3,800, 2,800. Love Lamont Wade, his ability to get on base and correlate. Should probably just be up in the leadoff spot. Maybe that's where they put him when this lineup comes out. I think that would make a ton of sense. Over 166. His power was down this year. We saw him hit for a lot more power last year while still getting on base at a great clip, but there's no arguing with his correlated scoring ability. He's tremendous for that, and he's cheap at 3,800, 2,800. Love that he has outfield eligibility for that price on FanDuel, so I don't have to block first base. Matt Chapman, 48-31, 9 home runs, 6 steals, pretty limited output, and has been in kind of a slide. He's been at these counting stats for quite a while now. 338 plate appearances. Still hits the ball very hard, just mixed results in terms of where the ball lands. Patty Bailey, good catcher bat for just 4,200. A lot of power there. Pretty good slash line so far this year at 283, 354, 428. He's created runs 26% better than average. I like him. Kind of a priority bat if you're stacking up Giants. Jorge Soler, 7.78 in the home run model, going up against all this premium contact despite the lack of home runs. That's got some appeal. 7.78 is up to 9 home runs, just a 161 ISO. The power's definitely been down. It's been out. It's been reduced, but he's come on a little tiny bit of late. 8.7% barrels. It's like up a point or so over like 2 weeks ago. Also 9 home runs for Conforto. Also 9 home runs from Tito Estrada. All 3 of these guys are good. All 3 of those guys can hit for power. Not one of them's been overly good this year. 100, 183 on the WRC plus marks. 9 home runs apiece. Everybody in the low 2s. Everybody hovering at or below 300 on base. It's been kind of restrictive for those hitters, but all 3 of those guys do have talent. They are playable if you're stacking Giants, and they're all cheap. Luis Matos from the bottom, 32-24, 255, 274, 373, 3 home runs. He's a playable part at the bottom of the lineup, just a really bad spot in the lineup if that's where he's hitting. Again, the Dodgers going to just be limited by the excellent ability for Logan Webb, by and large, to keep the ball on the ground. Very, very good pitcher on the other side in this pitcher-friendly ballpark. But if you're going there, Ohtani's easily your top priority. 69-47 in this spot is not good pricing. That is aggressively high for anybody hitting against Logan Webb, regardless of the ballpark. So in this ballpark, that's really high. Ohtani's still really good and good enough to break those prices. 25 homers, 16 steals, a 191 WRC plus. Will Smith, one of the top catchers in the sport, 57-34. Again, highly priced for this matchup in this ballpark, but he's Will Smith. He's got 11 home runs, a 201 ISO, 125 WRC plus. Freddie Freeman's one of the best hitting first basemen in baseball, 58-36, 12 homers, a 206 ISO, 155 WRC plus. Also, just a little bit high price for the matchup. But, I mean, when I say high priced, these guys are at their standard pricing for them. It's just you're not seeing any matchup discount for facing Logan Webb in this ballpark. Teoscar, 16.6% barrels, 50.2% hard hits, 18 home runs. Has cooled slightly, 235 ISO, still tremendous, 127 WRC plus. A little bit cheaper than his compatriots here. So, a playable part easily in this lineup and a top priority bat in this lineup if you're going to them. Andy Pages, 39-28, very cheap for a guy with 8 home runs in his first 253 plate appearances, 103 WRC plus. He's been good, not great, but good contact, 12% barrels. Jason Hayward, an effective lefty bat, bad home run spot, bad upside spot. Miguel Rojas, Gavin Lux, Kevin Biggio, mix and match options at the bottom of the lineup. Between the 3, Miguel Rojas has been the best one. He's probably the least talented out of the 3, but he's been the best one so far this year. You're just mixing and matching your way through anything at the bottom of the Dodgers lineup. Logan Webb, Dodgers bats, Giants bats, Landon Knack, just a dart throw and not all that well priced compared to a lot of the options around him. But again, all these guys are the same. To break this down one last time, everybody between the orange lines and including the guys on the orange lines, excluding Max Scherzer, who's just not going to pitch enough innings, I don't think. All those guys highlighted right now are essentially the same. Pick your lowest owned, pick your lowest price, what fits with your lineups, which matchups do you prefer? You can target some of the better matchups in there in that group of guys if you're just deciding between, like Ciccone against the A's. Even with the A's showing a lot of power, given how cheap he is and the fact that he projects at the top of that group, I do think he's a usable option. But it is the same with Andre Pallante at the bottom of that group. 64 on FanDuel, 77 on DraftKings. It's obviously not as good a DraftKings price, but he could succeed from that level against that high strikeout Reds team. So it's not completely crazy to go to any one of those options. I think you use them all in limited doses. If you're building 150, you want to have a good spread through those options. Focus on, your 5 favorites or whatever. Don't use literally all of them. It's too big a slate for that. But basically all those guys, very much the same. This 3-man group of pitchers is very much the same as one another, but better than this group of pitchers. Any one of these 3 guys could succeed. It's probably one does well. It's probably 1, and 1. One does well, one fails, and one lands somewhere in the middle. Pick your poison, pick your matchup. Not one of them is in a great matchup. Drew Thorpe, if this game plays, there's a lot of rain in the area. It's a little bit faith-based based on the minor league track record and the actual talent. It's a spectacular matchup at a spectacular price. Really love the Drew Thorpe option on both sides. Just got to get that game in. Logan Webb, we just talked about, probably going to go under-owned for his talent, for his quality, because the Dodgers are in town. Charlie Morton, tremendous option against the Pirates. 8,800 is a nice discount compared to the other top options on the slate on FanDuel. You don't get that discount on DraftKings, but you do get it on Bailey Ober on the DraftKings slate, which is nice because he's facing the very limited and high strikeout Seattle Mariners. Ronel Blanco, highly playable against the Mets. I still don't really believe in the talent. I am looking at the Mets as a consideration as a stack on the other side of that. Hopefully Blanco gets popular against them, and I can leverage a little bit with that stack, given the power and the quality that the Mets are showing. I kind of oddly thinking, and I haven't built the lineup yet, but I'm kind of oddly thinking that I might end up with a weird Mets-A's stack and whatever pitcher fits with that. That doesn't necessarily demand Drew Thorpe. I could probably get a better pitcher with that combo. So maybe I do end up going to a higher priced, better stack and using Thorpe. We'll see how it breaks down, but it's really interesting along those lines. Ober and Gilbert, the top 2 options easily. Ober, given the matchup against Seattle, does have blow-up games for sure. He's not anybody's favorite pitcher, I don't think, to go to, but I like the talent. I love the matchup, and I love the DK price at 88 compared to the other high-end options on the board. He could blow away the field at that number. 98 on FanDuel, he's just, he's an also-ran from the top of the board with all these other guys. And then Gilbert's just the best pitcher on the slate. Tough matchup, best pitcher on the slate. Apologies to Logan Webb. 6:23. I don't have time to dilly-dally and sit here and chat. Home run board one last time. Couple of Yankees, couple of A's standing tall at the top of the board. That said, the Yanks are fairly limited in their matchup. On the A's, you've got another 2 guys right here that are above the magic number as well. So you get Bleday, Andujar. Bleday's the home run pick of the day. Langoliers, Brent Rooker, all above the magic number for home run upside from the A's. That is interesting to me against a pitcher with a 5+% home run rate on the season who is pretty mediocre. But again, do think he could succeed threading that Ciccone needle at that price. The Mets are showing a little bit of mid-range power. You get Pete Alonso way above the magic number, but you also get Vientos and Frankie Lindor right there, and then you get JD Martinez right there and Francisco Alvarez right there. So again, good reason to maybe consider some Mets, maybe look at them as like short stacks and one-offs with all that power flashing. Kind of like that spot. Guardians I like, the Royals I like, the Braves I like for power upside. Boston is just straightforward and obvious with the highest run total of the day at the top of the board. Boston and the Braves, I just think, are both obvious, if you can get there, go there kind of teams. Both of these teams are in play in their head-to-head matchup with healthy totals. Brewers are in play, but I think the Cubs are kind of similar sneakily on the other side of that game. 2 lousy teams here, good totals. Good Diamondbacks option there. And then, just believable Orioles option. Yankees at a lowish total, but all that power that Kikuchi flashes and all the power they're showing in the model, at least around a couple of those hitters. It's an interesting slate, guys. 13 games to choose from. I got to go get shit updated and get these projections up on the board. Take about 5 minutes. They'll be up around 6:30. So just give me a couple there. And with that in mind, good luck out there tonight, gang. Enjoy your weekends. Somebody go win something today. Let's get 3 in a row. Win something tonight. Start us off right. Win something on Saturday. Win something on Sunday. What do you guys say? Spread them out a little bit. You guys absolutely rock. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe. Jump into the Discord if you're not there. Follow the @rotoscouts Twitter handle. That one actually does help out. If you guys like those and retweet them and whatnot, it does help feed the algo and get more views. So if you can do that, I'd appreciate it. And otherwise, man, have great weekends. Go win something tonight. I'll see you on Monday.